It's something iPhone Joel Schreiber. I don't know. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Hey, hi Ed. How you doing, Jules? Sylvia.
So
Hi,
sorry.
I'm
I know-
so,
Sorry. Been
So
trying to
Cool.
sorry.
reach
It's
you.
just been an absolute insanity here.
First of all, not more important, but how's mom?
My mother is in the hospital.
That we know.
She has COVID. She has pneumonia. She has a bacteria. So I got in on Friday. They let me in on Friday. And when they let me in on Friday, I got to see her. I FaceTime with all my kids. And then I went back this morning. They won't let me in. She's out of the ICU, but she won't let me in.
yeah,
So,
Because of COVID.
because of COVID.
whatever.
Oh my
It's an
gosh.
absolute mess. So
Everybody's getting it. Nachum has it. Noah
I know.
had it. We had to isolate. We went to
Listen.
Noah.
it's everyone has it. Ed, do I need to do anything as a host?
You're all set. It just if you want to throw someone out or mute them, you now have the ability.
How do I?
That's not
how do I
nice.
do that? Tell 'em what to
He's going to
do?
throw us out.
God forbid. What do I need to do, Ed?
Anyway, how
You
are you
just-
doing?
There's nothing for you to do. If you click participants, you can mute people or whatever. There's nothing to do.
Okay, fine.
I gotta run. I'm not gonna knock him some sexual ability on Yerushalayim.
Oh man, thank you. Thank you for everything, Ed. So whatever. Listen.
So how are you doing? I know first your dad.
Listen. I've had better days. I
Yeah,
can say that much. I've had better days.
Right. The Kavura is really very, very touching. I mean,
yeah.
I knew he had a
man.
great memory. I mean, when the story about Yeshua was not two psukim instead of one, that was beautiful.
Well, I'm sure you're not surprised at anything.
Listen, I saw it, Jules. There
You
probably
lived
hundreds
it.
of other stories. I'm telling what I saw. The man,
Yeah.
listen. You know, I remember seeing my father, fight with Rabbi Yagid. Jeff, you probably remember this also. So Rabbi Yagid was my father's next door neighbor in Shiva, and my father would sit down and literally tower over him. My father's got to be what, 6'6", 6'1". This guy must have been 5 feet, and he used to tower on top of him, and he would shake him as he spoke. I mean, listen, I felt bad for the guy. I felt bad for the guy, and my father did this countless times. It was just, I can't tell you, that's just who my father was. Better, worse, that's who
He
he
had a
was.
great sense of humor also.
He had a very cynical sense of humor.
Yeah,
My father is the most cynical man I've ever met. He had the ability to kind of bring out the best in you, scare living crap out of you. Seriously, listen, for good or for bad. I mean, listen, he was.
must have been hard on you.
You had an interesting childhood.
Please. My therapist killed himself. Let's not even get there. How crazy it was. No, whatever. Listen. my father was very hard as a parent. He was very hard. I mean, listen, the truth is that anybody in my age or older, that went to MTA, that was in his class, that he knew your parents, you were dead. You're just dead. You went in, you just
Well, I
went
didn't
in.
go to MTA.
You didn't go to the MTA, Yankee, but you knew.
I'm saying.
Listen, every time you
Yes.
saw him, and listen, and that was like every freaking Friday night. You saw him, you knew
Yes.
he was coming.
Or Shabbos morning, or Shabbos
Or
lunch.
Shabbos morning, either one. The test would come inevitably, and listen, I just want you to know, I have it all the time. My kids, my father would the parsha would come, and there were obvious questions like, how do you not know this, or what do they teach you at school? Am I wasting my money? So I've had that experience for half a millennium.
The Metzgers never scored high on the normal scale.
But just remember, he was there every Friday night, Yankee. I was there. I still remember, like the stories they say are not true, because we went to the Metzgers, we stayed for 2 hours, then we go upstairs and my mother would scream at him. There'd be a screaming match about, I told you not to go. Why'd you go there? You come back so late. So I understand, but every Shabbos we were there at your parents' house.
Yes. Yes.
So it was just whatever. It's a very bizarre experience.
Your father had no room for fools. Let's put it that way. Brook no fools, or how's the saying go? And so it always, you couldn't put anything over on him, and so it always meant so much to me that he thought so highly of my parents.
Listen. My father,
coming from him, it meant really a lot.
at least you know, Yankee. My parents, my father, I can count the amount of friends my father had on one hand. He had a lot of acquaintances. Friends, maybe 5. Izzy Vilas, your parents, of course. Alex Steinberger from Sam Block from camp. I probably missed 1 or 2. If my sister were here, she'd probably tell me. There's probably 1 or 2 more that I'm missing, but not a lot. My father was he was an open shut guy. He wasn't one of those guys that was like, he had a lot of acquaintances, he had a lot of students, but very few good friends. Seriously. So unfortunately, what I will tell you, Yankee, is what I'm planning on doing is for the Shloshim, I'm going to have an open mic night. I'm going to have a B'nai Shurin. We're going to have, there's going to be Shmorg there. And you kind of give me your best story. You got 3 minutes or else I'll throw you off. Give me your best Rabbi Dulitz story. And there's probably hundreds of them. There's probably hundreds of them.
Elchanan, you're gonna have to put a time limit on that at some point.
Oh wow!
6 minutes.
Rabbi Penner, I don't know. I need a moment. I need a moment for a second here.
That's
It's always 6 minutes, Rabbi Penner.
Okay.
yeah, 6
Rabbi Penner,
minutes.
ooh, la.
Say 6 minutes. I'm speaking for 6 minutes.
So I will say that. So I see on here. I see Rabbi Weider. So I would like to say, Rabbi Weider, this is something that you will appreciate. And I see Rabbi Richter, but I will tell you a story that I've heard many stories, not enough, because I'm not in Teaneck, unfortunately. For those people, my mother's in the hospital and she is not doing well. She's so. So I figured it was inappropriate for me to leave to go pay a Shiva call. My mother's in the hospital. I did get in to see her on Friday, but they won't let me in today. So I'm like, but I want to say, so Rabbi Weider, I know that this is your story from Chaim Ilson. Chaim Ilson, as you may or may not know, is an Eliotzim who's one of the top guys in the Rav Shir, who now has a beautiful in Eretz Yisrael. He has a kollel. He calls me up on Thursday and starts crying. He says, "I'm so sorry, I missed the funeral." I said, "Listen, I understand." I said, "If I had your phone number, I would have called you to ask me Moscow, because I know every time he's coming to Teaneck or he'd be in Florida, he'd visit my parents, he would tell them." So he says, "I want to tell you my story." My story was, he was in 9th grade, he went to Bronx Science. In 10th grade, he was in Rabbi Rakefet's class. After 2 weeks of Rabbi Rakevitz's class, he was asked to kind of like, well, leave. He then went to Rabbi Dulitz's class. The first day he's in Rabbi Dulitz's class, he hears a guy speaking, reading the Gemara. He calls on him, reads the Gemara, translates, and Chaim says to himself, maybe one day my kid will be able to do that. One day my kid will be able to do that. My father took him under his wing. My father literally, he tutored him, worked with him. By the end of the year, Chaim said, I was not only able to read the Gemara and translate, I was able to read Rishonim. Oh, hold on a second. This is it. I found it. I did it all. It's over there. Able to read Rishonim. I was able to go to Rav Alpert's class, which is the top shiur. And because of that, I was able to do everything I've done. And he said, quote, everything I am today and all my students today are all because of your father. Without him, I don't know where I'd be today.
Wow.
So I know, so you should know, there are a couple of students that I spoke to Saturday night. I spoke to Rabbi Counterfogel, Rabbi Talbis. I spoke to Shimon Kerner, who basically said the same exact thing. And I know in that Rabbi Weeder is definitely there. I just didn't get a chance to call you. It just, the night went away. But I know that you're there. Not even a question in my mind in that group.
100%. 100%. My students, I had students, I quote your father often reading Gemara and Shir, just pointing out things to guys. I had more than one of my students saw the announcement and they said, that was your Rebbe, wasn't it? I said, yeah.
You should know. So I sit down, and the only thing is that when I give a Gemara Shir, I hear my father in my ear, my background. I'm hearing him saying, that's not what it means. You got wrong shot. I hear him arguing with me in my brain about everything. And it's not, and listen, in a good way. My father he will live in infinitum in my mind, because he was just so overwhelming as a person.
The bigger than life personality.
Right. That's Rabbi Kinnerick. Ooh, ah. So
I quote him all the time also. I even quote the jokes. I told the boys, I said, when I was a student, my Rebbe used to tell me when I had to get kicked out of class. Yes. So there were two ways, the door or the window. So we were on the second floor.
So you should
I
know.
enjoyed the jokes also.
my fault. Listen, I tell you, as a student, you guys respected my father. As a child, I was an absolute mess. I was the hardest kid ever.
Yes, we remember.
I had ADHD on steroids, and nobody knew what it was at the time. So I was sitting with Rabbi Talbis last night, and Rabbi Talbis says, I got to remind you about your story. So I was 8 years old when Rabbi Talbis was in my father's class. Bruyers was off. So I was basically running around. My father had two entrances in his room. So I'd go into one. My father tried to catch me. I'd go around the other one. It was like the Keystone Cops. So finally he catches me, sends me down with one of his students, and says, you got to go learn. So he closed the door, sits down. I open the door, let out this massive and leave. My father puts his head down in shame and says, oh my God. Kabbalah. And I said, you know something? I didn't know it then, but I do understand now what it means. It means it's in this week's Parsha. Again, Parsha Vayera. It's basically woe to what we have lost. And I tell you, he was, again.
Whenever I'd go back, I think former students would go back, because when you're in Shir, he could almost never say anything good. But once you were gone, said to the new students, he would explain how you were normal.
They were much better, 100%.
He would often, when I would go see him, he would use the expression "Chaval da'avdim lo mishtachin." And I actually spoke about your father at our little minion Friday night, and I said, it's actually I was thinking about the origin of that medrash. It's in the Medrash Rabbi, it's in Chelek. It really actually fit your father more than I realized, because the story, it's God's complaining to Moshe Rabbeinu, right? The Avos had all this delayed gratification. I made them the promises, they got nothing, they never complained a word. You, one time, it doesn't go right. The first time, you all catch him. And knowing where your father came from and how hard he worked to get where he did, you know, it was very, very matim for him. And
I tell you, and you know something, I don't know if you guys who listened or didn't listen, if you want to listen to one speech, do not listen to my speech. Seriously, don't listen to Sally's. I thought Sally's speech in Israel, what happened was he kind of got shafted because we didn't get a chance to read it. He didn't get a chance, but his speech was by far the best. My wife says to me, I said, use it for the shlosh. My wife says, no, you got to read it. It was very good. So I read it on the plane. God knows I had 25 hours to read it, and it was spectacular. It was absolutely spectacular. So I didn't read my own speech or what I was going to say. I used my son's. It was spectacular. It was spectacular. I'm the last speaker on Shab. It's a 6-minute blurb. I do recommend you go hear it. Not mine. Mine, little Torah here, a little shmooze there, story here.
Can you send it to us, Hanan?
What I will do is I plan on printing this week all 4, my sister's, mine, and my 2 sons' speeches in the Teaneck Heilige paper.
Okay.
And for you, sir, I will send it to you, Lieber, directly.
Elchanan,
Yeah.
you know, the thing that I came away with from the Kavura,
Yeah.
one of the students, or one of the Rabbanim there, he hadn't seen your father over Shalom in 50 years and still remembers the impact he had on him. To me, that was impressive.
By the way, Ravar and David, I never heard of this guy. Never heard of, and I'm 56 years old.
That was the one?
Never heard of this guy.
Unbelievable.
His brother's Avishai David, who's like my buddy. He always comes to Teaneck. I see him, we schmooze. And my mother, when my father was still lucid, Thanksgiving, I had gone down to Florida to visit him. And so I was down here Monday, Thanksgiving for 5 days, and he was talking. So I asked him, I said, who do you want to be maspid? What do you want me to do? I asked Mechila. I got everything I needed to ask him that I thought I needed. That's it. And he said to me, Rav Schechter, of course, Rav David Miller, and Avishai David. I come home, I tell this to my mother. She says, you got to ask Rav Aaron David to speak too. My response was, who's Aaron David? So her response to me as well, of course, it's Avishai's brother. I said, that's great. Who is he? I've never heard the guy's name before.
That's so funny.
Reb Miller spoke beautifully.
They all did. It
It
Yeah,
was beautiful.
His was
It was a
unbelievable.
So
beautiful
my mother
trip.
said, so let me tell you,
Great,
my
great
mother
movie.
says to me,
There's a Thomas.
Avishai David's brother came in one day to my father's house in Pell Parkway, right before he met Aliyah. This is probably 40 or 50 years ago. And he said the exact same thing that he said the same exact thing that was said by Milton. He basically said, I just want you to know every single thing I've learned is from your father. Your father inspired me to be a frum Jew, to be, you know what I'm saying? And he said that's basically what he said. He said every single thing. So again, and you saw him, he said, listen, I haven't seen this guy in 50 years. Again, and it's not an exaggeration. I don't think he's left Israel in 50 years. And not only did I not know he was, so his brother says he's going to take a cab to the funeral. I said, come on. I don't make people take anybody cabs. So I'll get him a ride. So get him a ride. The guy who I give the ride to gives me such a big hug. He goes, thank you so much for the push to take him to and from to the cemetery. I said, you're welcome. You owe me one, I guess. I mean, I had no idea who he was. I never saw him before. I mean, the only thing is I told my mother, when we go for that Kamas Matseva, I'm going to drive my mother to Mir. I want him
Elchanan?
to Yes.
Elchanan, you don't know me. My name is Joel Schreiber. I was a classmate of your father. We were in the rough shiur together 60 years ago. I remember him sitting there trading with the
Hold
Rav.
on a second. Hold a second. Classmates, my mother wants me right now. Hold on. You don't understand. I can't even tell you how insane this place has been. But classmate, I got to write this down because unfortunately there's not that many left.
You're telling me.
Oh, yeah. Don't remind Joel. He's a very hush of a classmate, by the way.
I'm sorry, classmate. I'm sorry. My mother, again, notice, again, everybody that came in, I made a list, I counted it twice, know who's naughty, nice, etc., etc. So I just need to write that down. Yes.
But
So,
anyway,
yeah, let me
yes.
hear.
So I mean, he was my recall of him, and I haven't seen him in a number of years. Extremely bright, very sharp. He would sit up close to the rubs. He would trade. The rub would trade with him. Sometimes he made a mistake. He would get it. I remember Tuesday nights at Maria,
Right.
Rub Cave Shurim. His father was there, and he was always piping up with what the source was, where it was. And most of the time, almost all the time, he was right. You mentioned before that he was cynical. You betcha. he was cynical. When I went to a yeshiva, every day I wore a tie and a jacket. That was me. I wore a tie and a jacket. And when he came and saw me every day, he would look at me and would say, "Mr. West Side has arrived." That was Mr. West Side. It's always the same thing. I said, "Label, what do you want from my life?" "Mr. West Side." And I know of people, fellas in the class, who literally, if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have made it to Smith. They wouldn't. I remember him coming into a base measure at 6 o'clock at night. We were learning, and he looks at one fella. I forget his name right now, and he says, "Listen to me. You want to get smicha? You don't want to get smicha. Get over here and let's start learning." And he pulled these people through with his learning. But he was
when I came to New York with the body, I got stuck in Kennedy, and so I had to go home back to Teaneck. And at the restaurant I'm eating in was my father's Harusa's son, Simcha Lent's kid.
Wow.
Sure.
I go to him, and I said, it wasn't the one I went to college with. It was the older one. So I don't know this guy, but I see his face. I said, "You have to be Simcha Lent's kid." And he says to me, he sees me, got ripped everything. He goes, "Oh my God, my mother just called me. I just spoke to her, blah, blah, blah." So I just want you to know, God's upstairs. He's also pretty cynical. He's got a hell of a sense of humor too. Don't get me wrong. Let me tell you.
One last thing I want to tell you. Want to hear one funny story about your father? This was really a crazy one. We would stay over in yeshiva to learn. We had, dorm rooms, etc. And one after Shabbos, they were making Havdalah, and your father happened to be in a room, and the rooms in the old dorm had transoms up on top of it, Okay. And so the wise guys decided they're going to lock him in his room, and they took rope and tied the doorknob so he couldn't get out. 5 minutes later, there's Label Dulitz coming through the transom at the top with a newspaper on fire, trying to burn the ropes, So what the fellas do? They screamed fire. They took out the big fire hose, turned it on, and let the water go on his door, on him. Gewalt. There was over an inch of water in the on the dorm floors at the time at the end. But that was that was us in the dorm. That was us in the dorm.
So can you confirm this story? I heard a story from my father that after they got smicha, everybody went out for dinner. They went out to this place in the West Side, and there was a question about the kashrus. So my father, being my father, walks into the kitchen and says, "Who's a mashgiach here?" The guy comes and says, "I'm the owner of the thing, but I'm real from. Look, my father has this big kapata." And so my father said, "If you were up there,
I know that joke.
He was down here, then I would eat here. But since he's up there and you're here, I'm going elsewhere." Were you there for that story?
No, but I know that story. It's an old story.
I tell me this all the time about what they did or didn't do. I mean, it's bizarre. The stories you hear from those days where you didn't have kashrus the way we have today. And listen, my father was a subject of all his rebbeim. I see one of his granddaughters I see Rebbitzin Sharf there. Rav Paleoff, your father was one of my father's through rebbeim. He had Rav Bernstein, had Rav Paleoff, and Rav Paleoff actually told my father, kicked him out of the shir, said, "You got to go to the Rav.
Go to the Rav. You can do better."
My father said, "No." I said, "I'm happy you." And he said, "Get out. You're not invited. Out." He was in Rav Paleoff for 2 years, and then he went to he was in the Rav shir. And I remember, Joel, when I was in like 8-year-old or 7-year-old, and I got schlepped to the Rav Shir. I remember it vividly. I was in my speech. I said, hey, I remember the Rav calling on him, asking him, what's the pasuk there? What are you talking about? And my father, of course, can't just read one pasuk. He has to read the whole parsha until the Rav said, we got enough here. Yes, but whatever. Listen, my father was a very special guy.
He was. He really was. He was
Elchanan, you know that my father had him in MTA.
I did not know that.
That goes back. Whoa.
Well, so my father, I'm understanding that my father did have 3 generations of students, and he taught for 46 years. So it's not so crazy. I'm looking, if anybody can get me a name or names.
Anybody who was 3rd generation.
2nd generation, and many of them. That's not really, that's simple. I'm looking for a 3rd generation that he had 3.
I didn't make it to MTA.
Elchanan, I had him 3 years in a row, sophomore, junior, and senior year. I don't know if that counts for anything.
But did you have him for French?
No.
No,
I had him as a Rebbe. I had him.
Jewish history doesn't count, David.
Jewish history.
Jewish doesn't count. That's a gimme. That's like a mulligan.
I heard
Elchanan,
that
I saw people in the chat were saying there were 3-year people. I consider myself luckily to be a 27-year person.
Well, I'm a 56-year person, and years of therapy later, we're good.
Your father had a tremendous influence, positive influence, I have to add, on my entire family, and he will always have a place in our hearts. Amen.
Amen. I was a Talmud, and then when I became a Rebbe in MTA, and I was a colleague, whatever, he got such now every day. All of a sudden, when I was a Talmud, you can imagine, I was like, and when I was a Rebbe, all of a sudden now I'm like, Sonic, you said,
by the way, Rabbi Canary,
I had one a teeny bit of a Karsa Tov I was able to do for your father. We were both living in Pelham Parkway at the time. I was in Einstein then. And I used to give him rides home and pick him up. And he would say, can you pick me up? Arnie, can you pick me up? And it was the greatest pleasure. First of all, I was able to talk to him in the car, and I was able to do something for him, which,
and plus you had him stuck. He didn't have a cell phone, so he couldn't go anywhere.
Right, that's right.
my father, you should know, many people had, my father had, he was his utmost respect for Rabbanim. I remember, I saw Rabbi Cantervogel, he said, you should know what, I just got smicha, I just started teaching, and he gets called up at MTA for something, and it was done inappropriately, not enough to cover, in my father's opinion. So my father walks over to the guy, throws him against the wall, and starts saying, "Hey, this man deserves your respect." 5-minute charge about it. This guy must have been 20.
Yeah, you always made him a chav. If someone didn't give the right cover, there was no waiting.
Cover Torah was number 1. Even if it's his student, he may afterwards, tell you you're clueless and tell him, my father at my oldest son's bris. So Rabbi Cantervogel was there, and of course my father's first question to Rabbi Cantervogel was, "What do you have?" So Rabbi Cantervogel starts giving drushes here and there, and my father says, "I don't want to hear about this Narishkeit. I want to hear what you have to say. I don't want to hear what Chaim and blah 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 talks about. I want to hear what you have to say." So he basically had to revise his whole thing, and then my father said, "We're getting closer," and that was after 2 hours of fighting. Listen, Rabbi Cantervogel, listen, these people are brilliant. And whatever, what can I say? My father is.
You mentioned at the Levaya, you mentioned how when it came to the Rav, you always said Rebbe. Rebbe said this, Rebbe said that. So we're 11th grade idiots, and we're like, we knew that after what some kids didn't chop what it meant because he wouldn't explain. Rebbe meant Rav Soloveitchik. Rebbe said chat like this. Rebbe said chat. But those of us who knew, so we would tease him a little bit. Wait, Rebbe? Who's Rebbe? And he would like, Soloveitchik, and he would like, but we got him excited about it. He would be able to teach us who the Rav was. We egged him on, but he gave us an appreciation a little bit about the Rav.
So I'll ask you a very simple question, Rabbi Canary. If you sat in the Rav Shir, you sat in my father's class, the similarities are very scary. My father was the same
Well, the
abusive
style,
personality.
concentric,
Under the style,
the
style.
terms over here, concentric circles, the parallelism, the way things were set up in the Rubs and the Briskas Derech, that was the way he spoke. He had different words
spoke that
sometimes
way.
for it, but
Of course, but
yeah,
he
for
speaks
sure.
to morons, I suppose. The guys, as my father speaks to people before his year. The Rav got to speak to people after my father's year. So my father is, so what I'm saying, so I was talking to Rabbi Canfolk about this last night. He says, you know, that everything your father parallel was the Rav. The way his cynicism, the way he spoke, the way his playful gander, if you want to call it abuse, whatever you want to call it. But that was what that's what the Rav did. My father was the same way. He was literally like the Rav a step earlier. And so listen, the truth is, listen, my kids, you know, thank God my kids were old enough to really kind of appreciate him. And my oldest son used to learn with him every day, once a week for years. And the truth is I feel bad that my younger kids never really got that experience. My father was just one of those guys that just knew everything. He knew everything. And it was horrible because you could never catch him. And he was always right. and I'm not, and listen, so I'll tell you a funny story. So my father comes in into, this is one of his students is telling me, he goes, listen, he comes in, guy's from Boston. And the guy, he asked him to come over to the Rashi. The guy's clueless. He momish, knows nothing. So my father goes, walks away, and then turns around and said, by the way, do you know what your team did last night? He goes, I don't know. They lost 5-4. You don't even know your team's name? And he walks away. That was my father. He understood. He got it. My father just got it. And he just got it. My father he got it. He had the ability to really read people, understand people. And he was just that kind of guy.
He also sometimes, I remember one day there was something going on in Gemara Shir, and I guess I wasn't shopping. I don't know what it was. Anyway, he found me in the afternoon. I mean, I had him for the afternoon also for, you know, Shakespeare and stuff, but he found me in some math class and he called me out and he would pin me down in the hallway and chazur the Gemara from the morning. But he didn't do it he did it to me to make me feel good. He did it to me like, you know, like he was like talking to me and learning. Kila, I knew what I was talking about. In other words, he's talking to me in the afternoon, you know, called me out for 5 minutes. You know, the shot, 9 other places, you know, and it made me feel like, I mean, I remember it now. I feel like I'm against the wall, but it made me feel like $1 million.
He went into the dorms in the old days. In the old days, he used to go in the dorms. Your parents weren't there. My father was going to the dorms with those guys. My father was just, he happened to have been an unbelievable person. He happened to have been a teacher. As I said in my speech, my father was ahead of his time. He taught 30 single individual students in his class. Right. Each one got what they needed.
Right. He made it fun.
He made it fun, education. He challenged them. And listen, the truth is, the brighter you were, the harder he was on you. He was.
Yeah.
I mean, if you talk to any of the guys that coming out, a guy like, I don't know if Rabbi Weeder's on. Yes, a guy like Jeremy Weeder. This guy was, I mean, he's brilliant. My father gave him a tough time because he said, you have the potential. I'm not going to let it go.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that you realize your potential. And the guys that were there, the guys that had the most potential were there. He basically said, I'm here to take care. I'm going to instill everything, all the greatness into you. And I see Rabbi Penner taking notes. That scares me, but that's always the problem. Listen, Rabbi Penner, I don't miss much. Trust me.
I'll tell you.
Mr. Wagner.
He didn't only, yes. He
You
didn't
got
only do it.
You got a name. That's his chus. A name is already a level up.
This is true. But in my first year having him, I had to get used to him. So I didn't really understand anything that was going on. But his connection, you know what? Because he wanted to make a connection, he actually taught me how to blow shofar. He took time out of his day. He pulled me aside because he knew that I wanted to blow shofar. We had a whole conversation about it. And we must have spent probably at least 10 to 15 different learning sessions on how to blow shofar.
Did you have to do it long? Did you have to, your kiyas had to be as long as his?
It was actually, you just couldn't have any hook at the beginning. You couldn't have any hook anywhere. It had to be exactly the same spacing between each 9 of the
100%.
Oh,
By
my
the way-
goodness.
By the
It
way,
was,
you know why my father learned how to blow shofar?
why is that?
So what happened was, so my father, as Joe would probably tell you, my father's first Rebbe in YU, his name was Bernstein, Michael Bernstein, Moshe Bernstein's father.
Sure. I
And what
remember
happened
Michelle.
was, is that, and he was sort of like the, my father called it something, I'm trying not to be derogatory, but it was sort of like the, not the hoodlum shear, but the,
Sweat hogs?
what?
The sweat hogs?
The sweat hogs. We'll go with sweat hogs. I don't remember the sweat hogs. And what happened was Bernstein sort of like had Rahmanis on these people. So my father was there. So my father never blew shofar in his life. All of a sudden, he was in a wheelchair. And one year, his two son and son-in-law had gone to Israel. He had no one to blow shofar with him. So my father learned how to blow shofar for his Rebbe. He never blew shofar until he was 40 or 45. It's not like he was 30 blowing. He never blew. So he was self-taught. And then once he blew, again, my father always was, it's all about perfection. His kiss. And so when the Rav had some issues, he'd call my father over because he'd say, my father would take off his watch, watch in that stupid band, which I'd love to find, that stupid band, he'd put it down and he'd blow on the watch. 17 seconds, that's what the Ravs want, that's what he did. And he was able to hold these 17 second kiss for the whole thing. It wasn't just for that key to goal. He did 17 seconds throughout.
And he expected that from all of his Talmidim.
Listen, my father never expected anything less than he did himself. In all seriousness, he never did. And I tell you the honest truth, listen, he was one of those guys that was very. He did what he did. He was true to himself. Not to quote Shakespeare because I really can't stand it, but to thyself be true, and that's what he lived. That's how he lived his life. He never asked someone to do something he wouldn't do himself. He just he was a perfectionist.
Elchan.
Yes.
Yes. Just want to tell you, your father was a special person. I never forgot him. Probably never will forget him. And I just hope you have so many more pleasant memories of him. And he was a wonderful person. Wonderful person.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
No more tzara. He should be a tremendous man that share for you and your family.
Amen.
We didn't have an opportunity to know him.
When you get back, I have a lot of stories to tell.
So I will tell you, before you go, David, I will tell you. Amen.
We miss you back quickly, Elchanan. We miss you at
I'm so far behind Libra, you can't even imagine. I'm so
Elchanan, I just wanted to tell you.
I mean, what?
Elchanan.
Yes.
I wanted to tell you, I very much, that story about Camp Raleigh and the Rashis, I thought was a phenomenal story.
I saw it with my own two eyes.
It blew me away.
The man, listen, the man, and by the way, that's not his, the impressive stuff is when he starts quoting Macbeth, but he quotes the page and the line. You know what I'm saying? And he quotes Shakespeare, page and line. It's not, here's a passage. It's sort of like you need to know where it was, the context. You need to give him a drasha. You need to give a drasha. You can't just say something. I personally held that Shakespeare was a Sony Israel. We're not really sure if even if he was the guy who wrote it. And I told it to my father all the time. I said, I don't get it. How can you be machshav such a guy? But you do know who his roommate was. My father's roommate in college was Ron Lichtenstein. So they had this, I can't imagine what it was like. For me, after 12 o'clock, it was Star Trek in Nachum Barashansky and Schreiber's room. For my father, I don't think he did that. I think they were sitting down reading Milton thinking, is paradise really lost? I don't know. I can't imagine these people. I can't.
With the Kitteridge notes. You have to know it with the Kitteridge notes.
Oh, you have to only have the one version.
Shakespeare,
by the way, my father would not let them use the new version. You have to use the old version that he memorized. So if you told no one, sorry.
Oh, it's Act 2, Scene 3, line 5. It can't be line 6. We used to, by
You
the
should
way,
only
the
know
thing with the
symptoms.
Rashi, we used to do this. We used to do it to him.
Listen, my father was he was very special to many people. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, you know, I am but for him, and it's true. He really had the ability to really inspire. You know, as I said, I quoted. Now I didn't say who I quoted it from, but I quoted from Van Wilder, the movie, and he inspires the uninspired. Thank you, Steve. He inspires the uninspired. He was able to take people that mamish had no connection, had no anything, and he said, I'm going to challenge you intellectually, emotionally, halachically, religiously. And these people, you know, it changed their lives. I personally had 56 years of it, and trust me, that change has been one hell of a change. But
I'm very sorry about your loss.
Thank
Privileged
you.
to have known your father.
Elchanan, you were saying about he always defended Elchanan. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
he's saying that he always defended, you know, he even defended Rashi. We were learning one time locally, and somebody said something about the Rashi was unclear. He really meant something else. He says, no, Rashi does not obfuscate.
By the way, obfuscate was one of his better words.
I loved it.
For those normal people like myself, obfuscate is to hide. Now, it took me I had to freaking Google it to figure out what it meant. But he said,
well, you have to ruminate on that. And you have to,
I'd have to ruminate it. I was clueless.
I use these words in my classes. I teach English, and they look at me like, I said, look it up in the dictionary. My Rabbi taught me these words. They're real words.
by the way, my father, and I'll tell you the honest truth, it really killed my father that I couldn't read or write. I was literally illiterate through law school. Amish couldn't. I didn't learn how to write till after law school, and it killed my father because my father was one of these most erudite individuals, a man who could literally express himself in freaking 6 languages, and I could barely get through English, barely, and it just really killed him. And I tell you the honest truth, I understand his pain. I get it. I get it. Listen. Can you imagine? This is your love. You love this, you admire it, you worship it, you do everything you can to teach it, and your son doesn't like it, can't stand it, and is horrible at it. It was not easy.
You gave him a lot of nachas. You gave him a lot of nachas, you and your grandchildren. He spoke of you very fondly when you weren't there, like the rest of us.
Listen, you should know, so Arnie, when I sat down with my father, and it was inevitably a fight. Anytime we sat and learned, you know. So my son said in his speech was that he came down when he was 11, and the deal was he had to do his parsha with his grandfather for 1 hour. After the screaming, grunting, and yelling, and then my son would cry because I was home from my father, screaming at him, saying, and of course, the shvanach, my son never even heard of a shvanach. Forget about it. We didn't know what it meant. You see, the problem is that it's not like you did it wrong, just didn't know what it was. Nobody teaches these things to kids today. My father was from a different generation. He taught kids certain things, and my kids, they you know, so my oldest son started saying, you know something? This guy's not so stupid. He knows something. So my oldest son would take notes of what he learned from my father. He has a notebook of that.
Oh
so
my gosh.
I will say, so I told him that, I said that when I was in Israel, I was given a handout of 150 in my father's handwriting. 150 Yesodis that a person should know to be a Jew. So it was handed to me. I gave it to my son who does this. I said, here, scan it, send it out. I said, I guarantee you most people don't know most of them. So I looked through them and I'm saying like, I know it. I said, listen, because when you grew up, you know, realizing you didn't know something, you kind of had your father in your ear saying, how do you not know that? What are they teaching you? Why am I wasting this money on tuition? I can't tell you how many times he said that to me in my lifetime. Yes, Aaron.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Very sorry for your loss.
Thank you, thank you,
Amen.
thank you. Amen. Thank you. Amen. Yes, Mark.
I never had your father, but I remember starting MTA in 1963. Just down the hall, next door to us. And if you stepped out of our classroom, you knew that there was a power in that room. You could just feel the walls shake.
By the way, with all due respect, I felt that every day of my life.
But I'll tell you, when I used to run into your father sometimes in Miami Beach from time to time in the 90s and so forth, and he was quite the gentleman to me, and we had some brief talks.
So Noah, you have to understand, when you had a different life. For me, I don't know if you remember, so I gave a shir on Shabbos on the block. And so when my father would come for Shabbos, whatever, I had a couple friends that would just stop to come to the shir just to hear us fight. It was just like, listen, that's just how we did it. We sit down and get on a topic, and my father and I would just go at it. And for me, that was Thursday night dinner at home. I mean, to me, it's like, we did it all the time. I never really thought anything about it because that was our relationship.
This quite an unforgettable person. Really. Okay,
Amen. Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't know your father very well, but the real time I spent with him was, remember, we went to a Pesach program together one year, and he was the rabbi there, and he during Chol Hamoed Pesach, he was not very happy with people who did not wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed. I was very happy because I wore tefillin on Chol Hamoed.
Oh, that's right. By the way, you know where that's from?
Eliezer Gross.
That was from the Rav. The Rav was very from Rabbi Willig's here, who would probably, my understanding is the Rav was the only thing that the Rav held not to, Reb Chaim held not to wear tefillin, and my father wore tefillin, and it always bothered me. I said, I understand everything you do, the Gross, the Rav, how are you wearing tefillin? I asked him that question multiple times, and he said, subject deraisa, not even a question. I said, Reb Chaim was asked the same question. He said, no. The one thing that my father, I don't get it. My father said this. I asked him multiple times. I said, what does my father do? He doesn't say, again, what he says, how he does it, Shabsos Kochecha and Mincha Shabbos, every single thing. The Rav, every single thing. Mincha, he put tefillin on. I don't get it. How is it possible?
How about his thing about wearing tefillin, through the laning on that day of Pesach when they mentioned tefillin in the laning, right?
Right, that's first day of Pesach. So what happens is you read about the laning. So my father, every time we get up, you go to a hotel, my father would get up there and say, by the way, first day Chol Hamoed, if you should be wearing tefillin, comma, if you are wearing tefillin, don't take them off until after laning. After laning all the time. Listen, people look at me when I do it. I'm like the only guy in shul wearing tefillin on. They say to me like, listen, I'm sorry, but you may not know you're supposed to take tefillin off. I said, with all due respect, I do have smicha. I'm not an idiot. If you look at what you're laning, you realize why I'm wearing it. So,
Elchanan?
Yes.
Elchanan, you give a lot of cover to your father in ways you don't realize. During his lifetime, I'm sure the fact that you were giving shiurim on Shabbos afternoon, you were part of the Daf Yomi, and so many other things that the local community, Washburn Upper and Lower, would not be involved in Torah-related activities if not for the fact that you're the pain in the neck that reminds us occasionally. And I mean that.
So we just did that in our sugya to the guys that are here from the Washburn. We just learned this sugya right before my father got sick, and I said, God's reminding me. My father, when a person first 12 months, he's supposed to say, Arei Kaparis Mishkavo, and after that, he's supposed to say Zatzal, or the Mishmur takes out Zal, either one, speak to your local rabbi, but you're supposed to say, Arei Kaparis Mishkavo. So I say that,
the first year.
The sugya,
and you're, by continuing what you've been doing for years, that is, showing that the impact your father had on you, how central Torah was to him. And it
was my father's life. My father was able to learn for 4 or 5 hours straight in the middle of a tornado. It didn't affect him. I can't describe what it's like when you have a guy puts his hand in his finger, and Rabbi Blau can tell you all about it, and it's you hear this buzz like he has menorahs, and then all of a sudden, for the next 4 hours, he's dead to the world.
Yeah.
You speak to him, he
When
doesn't
when I
hear.
came, right, when I came to YU, I didn't go through MTA, but very soon thereafter, I learned about Rabbi Dulitz in terms of his being a legend. And truthfully, with his patira, it's the end of an era in many ways. But it was like you could not escape hearing stories about Rabbi Dulitz. And I finally, of course, because we're neighbors, I encountered him. I think I encountered him in other circumstances. And he would engage. I think one time I ended up engaging with him. And it didn't matter whether he knew you or not. He would start up a conversation, and certainly if it was related to Torah, he was right there. So Ginny and I want to offer you Nechumi before too many other people I know are waiting.
Thank you so much.
Amakum Yenachem Eschem, V'sog Shevel Eitzion V'Yerushalayim, maybe share smachot, and the memories, the engagement with your father should be a nechama for the whole family.
Amen. So you should know my father did have a tendency to talk a lot. So
No.
At the funeral, she says to me, I got to tell you a story. Roshetta was Masbid, my father, and she was walking with me from the kever, and she says, the first Shabbos I was married to my husband came home 3 hours late. And where is he? He walks in the door, and she goes, where have you been? And she says, Rabbi Dulitz, end of conversation. 3 hours. I said, listen, by the way, he probably told you some good chidushim. That was my father. Torah.
Elchanan, it's David. We'll talk when you get back. Welcome Yachem Eschem B'Sal Shavel Sim Yerushalayim. We'll talk.
Thank you. Amen. 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 So this Gemara, so now I understand why they say Trey Kol B'Shtame, because otherwise you 14 once. I understand Pshat Gemara now. Oh, Nichma Veil, it works. Give off.
Today's daf.
But let me explain something to you. Today's daf, I am right now 10 blot behind, and I am dreading the moment that I have 20 blot to do. I'm dreading it. I have 20 blot.
When I said Shiva for my mother and my brother was a long time. Chaber told me, pick up with everyone else. You'll catch up eventually, because if you go back and you always feel the whole part of Daf Yomi is to be with everybody else. It's hard otherwise. But
have you met my father? My father would say, no, you don't go to work. You have time to learn.
You do it from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. You'll be fine.
There we go, Josh. 100%. What do you give me a hug?
Elchanan.
Yes.
Elchanan, at least you're behind in Megillah and not 2 months from now in Yevamos.
Right. By the way, but I'm still 10 blot in Yishami, so it's still gobbledygook for me.
That's a different issue.
So, but I will say
you don't have to worry about keeping up with everyone else.
Right.
Aren't too many other people you're keeping up with there.
Well, listen, that is true, but I'll tell you one thing. So I asked myself, why did God take my father during Megillah? Look, guys, why? Every HaKadosh Baruch has a cheshbon, so I'll tell you. So my grandmother died 31 years ago. By the way, notice Megillah has 32 blot, which is 31 days, but let's get there. I made a scene for my grandmother and I come as Matseva on Megillah. And I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu liked this speech. It says, you know something? I'm going to do it again. So for the Shloshim, I'm going to do a Babli Yushami, a siyum for my father on that. That again, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a message. Sometimes you got to be smacked hard. Sometimes you got to get smacked harder. And sometimes you need to have Rabbi Dulitz smack you to figure out what the message is. But there is a message, but I think so. But I'm dreading it. I'm dreading every moment. So now there's a new chevra. I will tell you.
Elchanan Shimon Kerner here. We spoke last night on the phone.
Shimon,
We
how you
spoke
doing?
last night on the phone, and I told you a lot of the things personally. But there was one point I just want to add in terms of your father's being so kafuf to the Rav and being so enthralled with the Rav as a Rebbe. And when I was in his shiur, the fact that he spoke so lovingly about the Rav at all times, and he just built up our excitement for who this man was. So that was that added to my excitement. My first shiur I ever heard from the Rav was that year when I was in his 11th grade shiur, 1975. And the Rav was giving a shiur in Lamport before Pesach on the Haggadah. And that was the first shiur I attended. But I would have been excited anyway. But the fact that all year long I was hearing Rebbe, 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 and then I got to sit in that shiur, it was like I was in Gan Eden.
Shimon, I will tell you, when I came back from Eretz Yisrael, I took the Bechina with Rav Beretsky, and he says to me, "You go to any shiur you want." So my father's response was, "How can you not go to the Rav shiur?" So the reason I say this was right under you is Rabbi Blau. I sat next to Rabbi Blau in 1984 for a month. We were doing Talmud Ishchat. Mamish didn't understand a thing, clueless. Rabbi Blau literally was my Baturkabit. He would say, the Rav would say something, he said this. The Rav would say something, Rabbi Blau would say, this is what he said. He mamish was my Baturkabit for a month. I come back to my father, I said, Abba, this ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna happen, I can't. So my father says to me, how can you not go to the Rav? He gives me a 15-minute, what is it, not a dialect, but didactic. What? Tribe. There we go, thank you. See, you know what, I don't speak English. So my father, mamish, I said to Abba, I said, listen, Abba, here's the deal. You go to the Rav shiur for one day. You tell me it's worthwhile, I'll stay there. My father calls up his chaverim. He understood it was his last year. But I will say two things. When I was in the Rav shiur, one thing blew my mind. Lustig was he was Mishamish.
It was the Shamas then, yeah.
Right, I understand. And the Rav starts reading the Rambam, the Kesef Mishnah, the Magi Mishnah, reads the whole thing for like 2-3 minutes. And then Lustig realizes, oh my God, it's the wrong place. And he mamish turns to the end of the Rambam. The way the Rav was able to read that was just, it blew my mind. But the first time I heard the shiur from the Rav, it was Baloscha, Chumash shiur that he gave in 1973. I heard that shiur. It did blow my mind. I called my father up and I said, Chaval al Diavda. I understand what I missed because it was the way he was a maestro. He had an orchestra there. He was able to literally take kashas, terutzim, ideas, concepts, mix them. It was masterful. And I told my father, now I understand when you say Chaval al Diavda. That to me, for my generation, the guys that didn't get that opportunity to sit by the Rav, it was just, and when my father talks about it, like he would talk about about the fear and dread of going into the shiur and about being prepared. I mean, like I went into law school. I said, I don't care, pick on me. I don't really care. My father would tell me, like, you got called on, you would shake.
Yeah.
I unfortunately I never got that. I wasn't so confident. But my father told me about it. Amazing.
Anyway,
thank you for
nothing's going forward.
Hamakam Yenachem Etchem B'Toshar Ve'Li Tzion V'Yerushalayim. I can't say Laura and I got to know your dad, but sure sounds like you guys shared a sense of humor, and he
That's for sure.
Good day.
Elliot, we'll talk.
Hamakam Yenachem Etchem B'Toshar Ve'Li Tzion V'Yerushalayim.
Hanan, we love you. We're thinking about you.
Thank you so much. Amen.
Did you hear MTA in the early 80s? I didn't have your father as a Rebbe, but my Rebbe was Rabbi Fine, which was a relatively young guy. Did you hear from him?
I didn't go to MTA.
No, I'm saying you hear from Rabbi Fine.
Now like me would go to MTA. Look at me. Look at me. Don't I look Haredi to you? Come on. No, I didn't go to MTA. As my father would always say, only one of us would have survived. And since he was working, it wouldn't have been me. So I could never have gone to MTA. I was never, I was never able to, I was never, my father and I just didn't see eye to eye on just about everything.
You went to Scranton, right?
I did. I
You
went to
did?
Scranton. Yes, I did. And then I went to YU, and then
yeah,
and then here I am today in front of you.
Achanan, you know, we say Amakom Menachem. Why do we use the lush? I'm thinking now, just to me now, you know, there are many lashonos of Hakadosh Baruch Hu's name. We say Hamakom Menachem. So Hamakom. I remember someone paid Shiva call by me, and they gave me a pshat from the Rav. But I'm going to say something different. That Hamakom is the Hakadosh Baruch Hu is omnipresent. We use that name. I think that with your father, he took such a large place in your life and our lives that you need the lashon of Hamakom of a Hakadosh Baruch Hu's omnipresence to bring it a chama, if you know what I'm saying. Because the place that he took in my life, it wasn't the 56 years of you know, like you, but it was certainly many years, and we had many conversations during the time I was in the Shir, when I was in English, during years following, when I was in YU as a Rebbe and Koilel. We were very close. I loved him. I really loved him very dearly. He was someone so special to me. And I can imagine the loss that you are feeling, but Hamakom Menachem Elschad, only a Kadosh Baruch Hu can do it. And I guess part of the Nechama is to see the thousands, literally the thousands and thousands of us whose lives were changed because of your father.
So I'll tell you, one of my childhood friends is right there, Ari Dykman. I grew up with him, and he could tell you about every Shabbos was Bechina time. We started Minyan 101, and my father would take the Chazan Stender during laning, and he would sit down and give us all Bechinas.
Oh my gosh.
Every Shabbos.
I could have lived through one.
Let's say we got Bechinas every Shabbos. And of course, I was not the best of students, as people probably know. At that time, I was not a good student, Bichlal.
It wouldn't make a difference. With his bechinas, it doesn't make a difference how good you are.
but again, if you're starting at 45, you got a shot of getting towards a 65.
Right.
If you start at -2, positive number is a home run for me. Listen. As I said, my father. Listen. I was just my grandfather always told my father, you know something, Elchanan. He says to my father, Avimori would say, label this guy. He's a late bloomer. Just give him time. And so my mother always says to me, so Elchanan, you're 56. Have you bloomed yet? Welcome to my family. This is my family. This is the love and support I get. Yeah, so.
Hold on, it's Aryeh Dykman.
Here he is.
Here he is.
Who survived those bechinas.
We have to have a tremendous sakara satayv to your father for that minyan that you just spoke about. Baruch Hashem, that entire generation of us, and you're talking about at least 20 to 30 children that are now all have families and raised beautiful families. Your father has a big chalik in that, and he should be a melech shosha for us all.
Amen.
I just want to share one thing with the Olam. It's very interesting. My father, also used to bother me when I came home Bein Hazmanim from Yeshiva to go to the Rav Shir, even though I probably didn't understand anything that he was saying. But one particular thing blew me away about the Rav Shir. We all got into the Shir room, about 150 people. And literally, this is the last years of his life, and you had to carry him into the Shir. And he started speaking, he's very weak. And as he's getting into the Rambams and everything else, and he's getting animated, and he's getting stronger, and his voice is stronger, and he's going on, and everybody knows the Rav Shir was 3-4 hours minimum. So by the time the Shir is finished, we were all completely wiped out, and the Rav was like a new man, completely brand new. But I would say the only one from the Olam that would probably be as equally rejuvenated would have been your father. We all
That's
already
so
gone.
true. It's so true. He was, listen, he was Torah, he encapsulated Torah as a person. He was a very challenging person as a father, but as a Malamed, he was bar none. He was so unique in so many ways. And listen, he as I said, for those people who weren't here at the beginning, I'll tell you a fascinating story. It's a story of Chaim Ilson. So Chaim Ilson, as you know, is, I see Rabbi Willig's. So Chaim Ilson was is right now a Rebbe who he gives has a top kollel in Eretz Yisrael. In 9th grade, he went to Bronx Science. It's in Bronx Science. In 10th grade, he gets to Rabbi Rakefet's class, Rabbi Rothkopf at the time, and he's there for 2 weeks, and he basically gets kicked out. He goes to my father's shir. He tells me, this is Thursday, 3 days ago, he tells me the story. 3 days ago, he tells me the story. He says, I swear, I came to your father's shir. Your father called on somebody to read a Gemara and translate the Gemara. And and Chaim says to me, maybe one day one of my kids would be able to do that. That's what he's saying in his mind. My father took him in, taught him, tutored him. By the end of the year, he was reading Rashi's. We've shown him. He went to Rav Alpert's shir. He went to the top shir after my father. Chaim said to me, literally, everything I am is because of your father. He made me who I am today. He literally changed the trajectory of my life. And if not for him, who knows? He says, every one of my Talmidim has an achrayus to him. So I tell you, my father taught thousands.
That was your father.
He inspired tens of thousands.
Yes.
And he has many Talmidim and Talmidim and students of Talmidim. As I said, listen, I just had 56 years of it's like being in class 56 years. It's tough. It's tough. My father had expectations beyond belief, and listen, he expected excellence, and unfortunately, I was the first thing from it. But
Elchanan, as I wrote to you, his light shall not come this way soon, and it truly is something that I remember. I only had him for English lit, but he was amazing. He really was. A different persona that everyone says, and a legend, an icon, someone who we all remember, and that's why there's so many people who remember him that way.
Thank you, Michael. It's very nice. Thank you.
Elchanan, again, I just want to say thank you for the honor of speaking at the Levaya.
You're thanking the wrong person. It's all my mother. I told her that as Rabbi wants to talk. It wasn't a kasha, but it's all my mother.
The whole family, and just to say he was a great man is an understatement, and it's the loss. Once I was so proud when I was talking, I often get introduced with titles and stuff, which I know Hevel Havalim. Once he introduced one of my Talmidim, and it made me feel wonderful. It lit up my life that day. That Rabbi Dulitz called me one of his Talmidim. I'll never forget that.
Listen. That's the highest. Listen, that's a praise. To be called a Talmud is a praise, because most of the time my father has other terminology used, and I will tell you that I've had a couple friends that said my father's on speed dial, and literally every 7:01 my father would get a call from him, and he would seriously, why? Because he lived in Muncie, and in Muncie it was a long distance phone call. My father would say, I'm not paying for that. So he'd wait till 7:01 and then he'd call. And literally the parents would literally say, oh, hi, Rabbi Dulitz, how can I help you? Listen, that's what my father did. I can't tell you how many students, here, David Markowitz, how many times did my father call your father?
This is it. He dedicated his life to Jewish education.
Many times.
Tremendous loss.
Rabbi
I just want to say,
let me just share one anecdote. My parents have the best marriage of anybody I've ever met. They never fought. They never fight. The only time they fought was when I was in 10th grade. They would argue who has to answer the phone at 7:01.
I was gonna say, Josh, I listen, let me tell you something. I'll tell you a story. So when I was in 6th grade, I used to flip cards and broilers. And I used to flip cards and broilers because in the bathroom, because the English principal was a woman. And I'm thinking, hey, I'm safe. I'm in the boys' bathroom. Every day, Mrs. Rothschild came in to the bathroom every day to check on me. And my father would get a phone call that night. By the way, Rabbi Dulitz, I just want you to know. That's how it started. So I get to 10th grade, and at this point, I'm really not doing much. My father literally drove up to Scranton, scared the living bejeebies out of me. He basically, I walked into a room. I don't remember this. My friends told me. I walked into a room. It's my Rebbe, my father, my Rebbe, myself, and he basically said in no unsure terms, you don't want to study, that's your decision. But I'm not paying for Shiva. We're going to public school. You can go pack your stuff now. Let's go. And ever since then, I started learning.
It's amazing. Rabbi Dulitz, so your father frequently, I think I was the speed dial that your sister referenced in her.
That's what I was talking about today. I know, yeah.
Right. And so the phone call that we would get, but again, your father did not wait because I guess I wasn't even worth the nickel on the regional phone call from the Bronx to Muncie. So your father would call us collect.
Oh, and then my father all the time. My father all the time would do that.
Once my father would accept the phone charge, he would say, Mr. Markowitz, there's not a word I would say to you that I wouldn't say in front of your son's face. So have him pick up another line on the phone in the house. So I did. And then he would go on. Once he confirmed that the two of us were on the line, he would say, he's a weasel. He's weaseled his way through everything in his life. He's fooled everyone, including you, Mr. Markowitz, but he's not fooling me.
There we go. But
he's an 80. He said he's an 85 student. If he gets an 84, it's going to be a 64, and we're going to do this all over again.
But by the way, you should know.
Changed my life.
Listen, my father, we used to give. Now you have to say in MTA, the first and third quarter didn't really care. Didn't matter. You could whatever you wanted. So my father would scare people on the third report card and give them a 40, and the kids would like start shaking.
I wish I knew that then.
Hence the reason why you didn't. And my father would do it. So I guarantee you, your first and third, you got 30s. And on the second and fourth, you got, an 88 or 90, whatever you got. So my father was there. Listen, he inspired the uninspired. He was able to do that to so many people. And listen, at the end of the day, he did it for me also. Listen, my father has had some stellar Talmidim. And I look at Michael Miller, who's here. I mean, this guy, I can't imagine what Michael would do wrong in my father's class. He would probably sit down, steiged away. It's people like that. So I see Rabbi Miller right there, and I see him, and he's one of those guys. He's that learned, did everything right. Everybody loved him. Yay!
You say you keep talking about yourself a certain way, and I think that everyone on this call and everyone who watched Levi and everyone is still going to say that you were probably the best Talmud your father ever had. I'm welcome Menachem Eschem Mesach Shavetz and Yerushalayim. We should get together at Simchas.
Amen.
We'll see you back here at Simchas.
Amen. 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 Hey, dear Barbara. Awesome.
How are you, Alshana?
I've had better days. Not gonna lie.
That's true.
Amen.
I was never so good to have him as a Rebbe, but he was my Rebbe in the hallways. I can tell you that. He cornered me every day to give me advice, every single day.
By the way,
I would say that some of them were great. He would say, "Go back to your dreams, Rabbi Mendelson."
So, Rabbi Mendelson, so you should know, you took over Rabbi Yagid's job. My father used to tower over Rabbi Yagid. As a kid, I remember this, that Rabbi Yagid is like 5 feet, and my father's like 6'2", and he's looking down at him, holding him, and shaking him fighting about the Tosfos. And I'm saying, wow. And Rabbi Yagid is sitting there taking it quietly, no problem. Then he says, I think you're wrong. And then my father would start screaming louder. And then he would say, you got to check out Tosa Rush.
He loved the Mei Menuchas. The Mei Menuchas was his Rebbe for every Tosfos. And I was mishamish him whenever we went on trips to Martha's Vineyard. That was the 10th grade trip. I used to carry the briefcase. Yeah.
Whoa.
I made sure he was all set up to mark his tests, which he put the
By the
grades
way,
on top before he marked them.
you got the ones that were full. I used to carry the briefcase when it was empty. There were times, contrary to popular belief, there were times that there was nothing in there. My father had a briefcase, Bishita. Listen, sometimes you put something in it, sometimes you did. That's fine. There were times he had nothing in there. And I would, as a young kid, I'd open up the briefcase, there's nothing there. I said, but with all due respect, at least put your lunch in, make it look good. And again, his persona, he used to do certain things. He used to do certain things a certain way. So I see Dr. Joshua Lamb, another one of my father's students during the Elchanan Dulitz peering years. And it was, you can unmute yourself, Josh.
Welcome, Menachem Eschem B'Sosha V'Elatzim V'Yerushalayim.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Tzvi.
Together.
I want to tell you.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to be able to talk. Elchanan,
yeah.
How impressed I was by the Levaya, both the Levaya in Florida and the Levaya in Bet Shemesh. The way the speaker spoke, it was so articulate and so eloquent. And it was really a testament to your father. The fact that they spoke so well was in itself a testament to him. They attributed to him. That itself should be in the Chama.
Thank you so much. Amen. Thank you so much.
Elchanan, I just wanted to tell you that I was so saddened to hear about your father. I really loved him. I was for about 20 years after I left MTA and left the Shir and YU. I tried to call him once or twice a year, Erev Pesach and Erev Rosh Hashanah, for many years, and then it petered out. And luckily, I hadn't spoken to him about 8 or 10 years. Luckily, last Erev Rosh Hashanah or Pesach, I called to wish him a happy, one of the two. And he was not in, but I spoke to your mother, and she's promised me that she would convey to your dad. So I'm glad I did that. But he's a lot of times he was always on my mind. I have to tell you something that I learned Gittin with him when I was a junior. I was there for 2 years. In those days, that was very rare. I learned Gittin with him.
2 years in his Gemara share, that's almost unheard of.
I'll tell you a story privately that will explain why I bounced back to him. But no one was more shocked than he that I came back.
Listen. He probably asked for you.
Well,
knowing that, he probably asked for you. And let me
anyway,
tell you, there are very few people that he asked for a repeat performance.
Yeah, I after a couple of months of being terrified of him in the first couple of months, I kind of caught on to his game very, very quickly. And I understood that, with all the yelling and screaming and ranting and raving and threats, this was a very funny man who had a mission, who always had a twinkle in his eye, who never took himself, at least in that context, that seriously. But he got the results that he sought. He really did, because of the force of his personality. Anyway, 50 years after I learned Gittin with him, I'm learning Gittin with a Chavrusa, 50 years later. And when we got to the parak that I learned with your dad, it shocked me how much of it I remembered. It didn't just sound familiar. I remembered what he taught. I remember the Inyanim. I remembered the Rishonim, the Achron. I remembered the stuff that he taught me. So I always knew I got a lot out of his shiur and a lot out of his English literature class. But it never dawned on me until I did this a number of years ago, how much he taught and how much staying power it had. Anyway, I just wanted to wish you, Makom Yanachem Nasem B'Sosha Tzil Yerushalayim. Very, very sorry to hear it. Please send your best to my mother. I tried to call her a number of times. I couldn't get through.
Unfortunately, my mother's in the hospital.
Oh, I'm so
hasn't
sorry.
Feeling well. She has COVID. She has pneumonia. She has an infection. So she's been there. I was able to get in on Friday but they wouldn't let me in today, and hopefully I'll try again tomorrow to get in. I don't know. So she's been,
Right.
you know, I tell you the honest truth of that is it's been very hard for her because, so what I do is just leave a message on the house phone. My son's going in transcribing, so my mother will see who calls. So, but I'll tell you, so listen, not only do I remember what my father taught me, it rings in my ears. I teach a Gemara, and something in there, Haredi Kaparas Mishkavo, rings in my ears, because my father would say these things to, you know, would say, you know, I call them Abba-isms. You know, my kids, you know, kids make fun of me, but again, my father did a lot of things. And when I would go to yeshiva and the Rebbe would start talking, I said, yeah, no, Brian, I know this already. The Rebbe goes, what? I said, you understand something? I had a full-time Rebbe in my house, for better, for worse, but I did understand, and he was very difficult to accommodate, but he always knew what he was doing.
Yep, he certainly did. And I was the beneficiary amongst many, many thousands of people. So for that, I am ever grateful to him. Anyway, Shav and Nachman, please wish your mother refuah shleima for me.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Elchanan, I just like Josh Lamb said, I also had him forgotten. Really, it was an honor to have your father in 10th grade, and I see, I mean, Danny Reich.
Don't forget Rolly, Brian.
Danny Reich is here. We were in the same year together in 10th grade with your dad, and you know, he taught us and challenged us, you know, in a way that I never experienced before, and I never experienced again after. Straight through law school, never had a teacher that challenged me in the way that he did. It was really remarkable. And still, I remember specifics from that year of getting all those years ago, and of course I got to see the lighter side of him because I went to Camp Raleigh, where he was head of chinuch. And I hope I'm not embarrassing you by saying that you spent a year in a co-ed camp in 1977. And we were actually, so among my many interesting and good memories of your dad. So we were in the same bunk in 77.
I remember vividly.
He came into our bunk just to see you and speak to you. And at some point, he looked up on the wall and somebody had put up that famous Farrah Fawcett.
Farrah Fawcett one, yeah, I remember.
Right?
That.
And like, and he does that like double take where, you know, he just looks at it and he just walks over to the wall, rips it off the wall, teared it up into pieces and threw it out. And 45 years later, I still have that memory like burned into my, brain.
But he never said anything. He just ripped it up.
No, yeah, it was just like.
Remember, you didn't say anything to anybody. You just walked out.
His actions spoke for themselves in that one. Yeah, that's.
He was. That's what I'm saying. He was just larger than life.
Yeah. Thank
you.
I'd like to. Elchanan, I'd like to add something.
Amen. Yes, Danny.
Elchanan, I'd like to add also something light, but just to show you how much he loved his Talmidim. We had 2 or 3, maybe 4 students in the Shir who were on the JV basketball team. And the JV basketball team had a good year. And your father promised us, if you make it to the final game, to the finals, I will come. And he did. He kept his word. He came to I remember seeing him in the stands, the Educational Alliance down on the Lower East Side. He came for the final game. And to me, this was like, wow, this is somebody who really must love us. Because, you know, his time learning this, that, but to come to the basketball game, he knew how much it meant to us, even though now when you look back, you realize it wasn't that important. But at the time to us, it was important. But he kept his word. He was a man of his word. Of course, we learned tremendously amount of Gemara and so forth. But the feeling that we had was that this Rebbe loves us. For him to do that, to come. And I think he was happy that we won. Even I mean, he didn't really speak much about it afterwards. But in any case,
question this week. But again, actions more than words. I agree.
100%. And when one of my favorite moments, on a Motzei Shabbos here in Bergenfield, it was when your father was here for Shabbos. I went over to him, and he looks at me and he says, "The twins." instantly remembered me and asked me how I was and so forth. So we have very fond memories of him, and you should have a
You
nechama.
never forget many people. Thank you
You
so
should
much.
have a nechama.
Amen. So Rosh Hashanah, I know you're not going to talk.
Malcolm, you're not
Unless I
going to put
talk
yourself in late Shalim.
Amen. Thank you.
Elchanan, can you hear me?
Amen.
Look
Can
forward
you
to
see
seeing
me?
you in Teaneck.
I can see you, Sam.
Okay, I just wanted to tell you one thing, because you're bombarded with so many people. You have so many friends, and your father of Shalom had so many admirers and
I
friends.
usually rent my friends, so my 25 cents is almost up. So I got to be nice to you. Yes.
I just wanted to comment. One of the most striking aspects and attributes of your father of Shalom was his kibbud avoim. You know, Linda and I used to love to get a call from him, because as soon as he would hit New Orleans, he would call, and most of the time Linda, but once in a while myself, we would take him. His first goal was to go to the supermarket for your mother and your father, Alayhim Shalom. And
My grandparents.
everything.
Right.
I'm sorry?
His parents, my grandparents.
Your grandparents, yeah, your grandparents, yeah. He practiced kibbud avoim more intensely than practically anybody I ever knew, and I was amazed how he did. He apparently did so many things from a distance. Also, that was his. That was really a key mitzvah for him, kibbud avoim, and we'll miss it. We miss it.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Yeah.
We'll get back to
Should have only simchas.
I'll get back to you about the shloshim when I figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah, we really want to do something major.
So my goal is to have an open mic night. For all my
Have what?
father
I'm sorry?
students. An open mic night. I want
Uh-huh.
all my father students to be able to literally come in, 3 minutes, give me the best Rabbi Dulitz story. And you get 3 minutes and then we turn it off. So I'm figuring after 14 hours, I think everybody will get their 2 cents in. But I tell you, the one thing that I did miss is that I was planning on coming to Teaneck and sitting, so just in short version, what happens is that the Shulchan Aruch paskins that if you come back from burying a parent and Rosh Bias, the parent is still alive, one parent, you could stop sitting Shiva. So Rabbi Neuberger did not want us to, is not fan of moving during Shiva. So my theory was I would finish up Shiva with my mother Saturday night and then come back to Teaneck and sit for 2 days. Unfortunately, my mother's not doing well, so she's been in the hospital. So I felt kind of didn't want to leave my mother, so I'm kind of staying here. So I don't have a ticket here back. I don't know when I'm going back, but I figured. So I spoke to the rabbi, and I see Pesci right there smiling. But and he convinced me to say have a Zoom. I said, listen, I'll have a Zoom, fine. So but my goal is to have an open mic night, have a nice shmorg, people come and eat, talk about my father. Listen, as I said, my father had thousands of students, but he influenced tens of thousands.
Yeah, he influenced his friends also. You know, Erwin and I used to get together with him, and we learned so much from him just by being within his Dalit Amos.
I just wanted you were the two of the last. You were two of the last
left standing.
New Orleans boys.
That's right.
Ever.
We're the last two of the
family.
yeah.
I see you both. I'm like, hey, listen. So I listen. By the way, I know you called her when I told my mother. So I will when my mother gets out. I'm going to tell her she will reach out to both of you. She's just not doing too well these days. So
yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I hope she does. I hope she has a refuah shlema medically, and I hope she'll be able to overcome her tsar.
Amen. Halavai weiter.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Thank you for talking with me. I appreciate it very, very much.
Listen, you were one of my father's oldest friends. I mean, you've known him for what, 85 years?
Second to me. Not quite. I think from the time that I was about bar mitzvah, a little bit past bar mitzvah, and I'm now 83.
So what I'm saying, my father was in New Orleans since he was born. So you guys, he was friends with you before his bar mitzvah, was he not?
We were friends. We were lifelong friends. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Three of us. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The three of you. I understand. How many from guys were there in New Orleans, Louisiana?
Handful.
Very few, very few.
I will ask you the very important question. How long did it take you to get on a train when you came to New York?
How long? What do you? I don't understand the question. It
My
didn't
father,
take.
my father would not get on a train for the first year he was in New York. He always
Oh, no.
discussed it
No, I
because
got on a train right away.
he came
First
from
day.
the South, the mixing, unacceptable. Seriously. You know, my mother told me this, and I said, Mom, wasn't there mixing in the buses too? Akasha. I don't know. My father was my father. He had his own shtick.
I got over it right away.
Yeah, well,
Listen,
he
I
had
want
to
to
do
tell you.
that.
I want to tell you something about your father, but you may not know. When
I'm
he came to
listening.
New Orleans, he used to come to my father's store. My father sold used books, and he would take a couple of sackfuls of westerns and detective.
Like he was a big Hardy Boys guy. Yeah, that I didn't know about the westerns, but he was a big Hardy Boys guy.
And when he went to the bathroom, he didn't want to waste any time, so he read those books. And 2 or 3 days later, he was back for another couple of sackfuls.
Oh,
He was
father,
amazing.
He was younger. He's an avid reader, very avid reader. Me, not so much. Not so much.
Like,
Yeah, me.
anyway, how about coming up here, Miss
Thank
Shalom? In case if
you
you
so much.
same to your sister.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Welcome, Menachem, Eschem, B'Sel Shavei Tzil Yishalayim.
Amen. Amen.
No more tzar,
Your mother.
Amen.
only simchas.
Amen. So Ramosha Tzvi, I know you're not going to talk to me unless I talk to you. So I'm hereby talking to you officially.
Thank
What
you.
you got?
Thank you for talking to me. No, this is amazing. I mean, I hardly knew your father. Obviously, his reputation is, as everyone mentioned, larger than life. And these stories are just, you know, as someone who's trying to be a Rabbi and an educator, just to hear that the level of commitment and dedication and self-sacrifice, and he was all in. It was unbelievable. It's just it's very inspiring.
He went into the dorms and taught the kids that didn't have parents there.
He met the students wherever they were, it sounds like, physically and emotionally, spiritually.
He was
mind-boggling.
He did that. He did. I had friends that said that, you know, they were in the dorm, and all of a sudden Rabbi Dulitz is there. And he said, what questions do you have? What you learned today? They like, hey, listen, I'm off now. I don't have to learn now. I'm in the dorm. My father did it to help, whatever. He was he had a persona, he had an agenda, and his agenda was God. You know, for better for worse, he came in, he was there, he took care of everybody. He was you know,
yeah,
people, you know, whatever. As I said, to me, it's there's so many students out there that I'd like to, you know, you want to hear their stories. Because he was just 1 in a million or billion.
Right. And to have that level of commitment to the Talmud who doesn't think he can do it, and to just push and push in a way that I see your potential and I'm going to make you. I mean, you told tens of stories already tonight about individuals who, you know, who could have easily fallen through the cracks, and your father scooped them up and lifted them up and held them accountable, and he made them great. It's an amazing thing.
He inspired the uninspired.
It's really amazing.
Elchanan, Michael knew your father. I just heard about him from hearsay, and I have to say the stories I'm listening to are beyond rich and beyond beautiful, and it's a legacy. And I hope that you keep it going, just in terms of relating to the children, and the grandchildren especially should just know who their Zaidi was.
Thank you.
The stories that were written about him over Shabbos, his Talmidim, who wrote letters to the editor about how wonderful he was. Very special.
So what will happen is that my father, I told my kids to make sure that their grammar is correct, as my father would say, because I want to print them up in the link.
Nice.
My kids, listen, as I said, I told Sally, I think by far his speech was better than mine, by far, because he was able to look at my father as a grandparent, not as a parent. And my father had my kids had a very unique relationship with my father. I feel bad Then my grandchildren won't have that. But my grandchildren, my kids did. My kids came down, they would learn with my father, they would, all my boys have sat down with my father and have had that experience. They may not have had him as a Rebbe, but they had him as a as a
Zaidi Rebbe.
As a Zaidi. And
Yeah.
the truth is, as I said in my speech, that's what the Chafetz Chaim says, is that they went down to Egypt because they had a Zaidi. And to have a Zaidi is the most important thing. It's because, as I said, a Zaidi is a guy who sits at the table, doesn't have to say anything, doesn't have to talk, doesn't have to walk, doesn't have to look. You just act differently when Zaidi's at the table.
Hard shoes for you to fill, Zaidi. But you should fill it with gesund and with many wonderful memories. Hamakom
Amen.
yilachem
Amen.
b'toch shav leitzion v'Yerushalayim.
Amen. Thank you so much.
המקום ינחם אתכם בסוף שעה לציון בירושלים.
Thank you.
Rabbi Chanan.
Hey, Tzaddik, how are you?
Each one of us have had an experience with your father, Zichrono Livracha, in so many different ways. Some as a teacher, some as a Rebbe, some as a Mechane,
Some of the neighbors showing up.
But those of us who were in the Tammint Hotel for Pesach was a different Rabbi Dulitz. But you first of all, two things. One, you speak so self-deprecatingly, and it really is unbecoming of our Rebbe. You lead the blot shir every Shabbos, and thank God you are there, because otherwise I end up doing it. So and it was mentioned before. I think it was mentioned during one of the Spadim by the Galbert brothers that your father took great pride in the fact that you were doing that, even though from his perspective, even a 3-year-old could teach that class. But and you also said about you and your father, and you weren't this and he was that. And maybe he didn't care about you. So I know I have proof.
I said he cared about me. I just said that we didn't agree on anything.
But I have proof that he cared about you. I proof that he cared. So this is the 1966 Elkanite.
Yeah, but that was before I was 3. That's a picture of me holding. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's me. I remember.
So
is that the one that says so perspicacious for someone so young?
Correct. That's exactly what it says, and Manny. That's correct.
So perspicacious for one so young.
As one thing that many of us would never go to, I certainly would not forget, my wife doesn't forget, is that every year he would march in the Israel parade, but he wouldn't march like everybody else. He would march with his briefcase.
Oh,
right? Every year he would always have his briefcase.
What's in the briefcase?
I want to know, Elchanan, I want to know what was in the briefcase.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But as I said, when my father would march in the parade, it was the weirdest thing, because I would sit on the side, because I would go down, because my kids were in the, Y&J, whichever school they were in, they were there. So I was watching my kids. My father would go and he'd walk like Pigpen, Pigpen, and the whole, everything follows him. My father would walk and he'd be surrounded by Talmidim. They'd all come in, how's Rabbi Dulitz? I mean, for all those years, he'd walk in and you how did you find my father? Where was the blockage on the thing? Where were they slowed down? Where did they stop? That's where Rabbi Dulitz was all the time. He'd come in, he'd have his students there. It was
I just got a text from your wife who told me that your father-in-law also wanted to know what was in the briefcase.
But by the way, listen, when I was a little kid, I told you I opened the briefcase once just to see what was there, and there's nothing there. He just walked around because that's what a rabbi, you gotta have a briefcase. I mean, it's like Peter Griffin. He always goes to work. He's got to have a briefcase. Nothing has to be in it. But
maybe the nuclear codes.
I'm sorry.
Maybe the nuclear codes.
Listen, something. I wouldn't be surprised. It could be that it was taped in and I missed it because I just looked at it fast. But the point is, my father was he had a persona. He said, "Listen, here's how a Rebbe's supposed to be. You got to have a briefcase." Listen, for Rosh Hashanah time, he had a chauffeur there. There were times he put stuff in there. Other times he had an umbrella in there. I saw him with an umbrella once. I said, wouldn't it be easier to just carry the umbrella by itself? I put it in a briefcase. Whatever. He did his thing. God bless him. No idea. Is Israel? I don't know.
Elchanan,
I did, Sam.
Hi, Elchanan. I just want to say, you know, I didn't really know I never met your father. I didn't know him, but I'm here to offer any comfort I can to you.
It's
And
always appreciated.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Elchanan and I were in a share at the Cafe together twice a week for how many years? 10 years, maybe.
Until they disbanded it, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe they'll could
They
get it
don't
back
have mincha
again.
anymore. Cafe stopped mincha. There's no mincha anymore.
I'm not now, yeah, but I'm saying maybe someday in the future. Who knows?
Who knows?
But well, I moved from Teaneck, but I get there about twice a week still to see clients, and hopefully.
You know my number, Sam. You can always text me.
Okay, because I'd like to, maybe we'll sit down, have a cup of coffee, and you can shoot down some more of my Yiddishkeit theories like we did. And I didn't know your father, but I get a feeling you're something like him, and you always spoke of him in the most respectful.
That is a very scary thought, Sam.
Yeah, okay, I don't know, but
no. So Rabbi Kanafogel said to me that as much as you think you're different, you're just like him. And I said that's a very scary thought, because at the end of the day, my father was the exact opposite of me in certain ways, in many ways. But I tell you the truth, and that is, I did get my cynicism from him. I did get I got my learning from him. He taught me how to learn. You know, he was my Rebbe Muvak. At the end of the day, I learned more from him than I did from any other Rebbe. So he was my Rebbe Muvak. He taught me, you know. The only difference is that when I went with him, it was sweat and tears and a lot of screaming. A lot of screaming. Seriously, a lot of screaming.
That's what I mean. I can see you were probably somewhat of a reflection of him, because you're not a foreign stranger to the idea of a lot of this. I'll say a good screaming sometimes. You know, you express yourself forcefully in a driven way. But I say,
Amen.
I hope to see you soon.
Amen.
Elchanan.
Yes.
I know your father from a different context. I was not a student at MTA, but I spent a summer with him when he fell in love with another woman.
Oh, Nechama.
Nechama, yeah.
Oh, Nechama. Oh, he loved Nechama. Ooh. Nechama Leibowitz. My father went for a summer to Israel, and Nechama Leibowitz was giving classes. Now, understand, my father knows Tanakh by heart. So he's going to Nechama, and she had no idea who he was. You know, and she'd quote a pasuk, and my father would finish it, tell the pasuk before the pasuk, after the Rashi, you know, and like Nechama was kind of like, you know, like, whoa, hold on a second, buddy. So my father loved her. They were like I'm surprised that my father never really like followed up with her, because she was Nechama Nechama Leibowitz, of course. My father loved her. I still remember my mother says to me, the first question she asked was, how long were the Jews at Har Sinai? Answer was, for a full Hebrew year, 11 years less in the total year. So that was the question. That was the answer she was looking for. My father's response was, well, pasuk this, pasuk that, blah, 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 you know, a soliloquy as opposed to a simple yay or nay. But yes, he loved her. So let me hear what you
see. You told me. He used to quote the Rav to her, and I think she responded that she knew him from Berlin. And yeah. And I think you told me that he came back that summer with all the sheets.
Oh, he had all the sheets, and he loved everything about her. He was such a you know, see, the difference is that some people like Chumash, some people like Gemara, some people like Shakespeare. My father knew it all. The one that says he knew it all. He just knew it all. And as son, that was really annoying. Seriously, it's annoying where how you have a kid in class who knows everything, and you just want to kill him. You know, that's what my father was. He knew everything. It wasn't like he came home and he said a chiddush and he said, "Ah, that's nice." He sort of like said, literally nothing. Whatever. He goes. I don't want to hear what Reb Chaim says. What do you have to say? I want you to think. My father was a man who wanted people to think. You know, in other words, so my father was a very, he really held that Torah is about understanding who I am vis-a-vis Torah. And you have to be able to do that. You can't just, let it go. My father, like he stood up for it. He really enjoyed it. He loved it. He was a huge fan of it, and all aspects of it. You know what I'm saying? He knew, he knew that we showed him on the Chumash. It was like, as I said in my speech, he challenged kids to trick him. So when I was in Raleigh that first year, he said to them, he said, you pick 3 Rashis, and if you trip me up, you can walk away. No questions asked. My father, he knew what he was doing. He had it down cold. He was just such a special force. And whatever. And he will, and every student will at some point in time say, listen, you liked him, you hate him, agreed, disagreed. That's fine. At the end of the day, but you knew that he was going to change your life. He was going to change your life in one way or another. My family's from because of my father.
I think part of what your father probably loved about Mora Nechama was that it wasn't just the breadth of her knowledge, it was the fact that she was the ultimate teacher. He probably connected in that way to see someone who was also so meshugana about her students literally around the whole world.
Correct.
I mean, anyone who sent her any type of correspondence, took her tests, she was so engaged in interacting with people who loved to learn with her and from her. So, but I can tell you, Rabbi Chanan, I don't think I've ever had an encounter with you where I didn't walk away with a new Vart or a new Yerushalmi or some insight. So I think a lot of your father's love of sharing and teaching is definitely something I've received from you, even though I was not zocha to receive it directly from your father. So I hope you'll keep teaching me along life's journey.
Amen. Amen.
Sherry and I were so sorry for your loss.
Thank you so much.
Unfortunately, I never met your father, but from these brief stories I'm hearing, wow, what a personality, what a dynamic.
Your son's up there. He probably heard a lot of them from my son.
Yeah.
Listen, our sons were roommates for many years.
I was just going to say.
One second, I'm leaving soon. I'm leaving in 2 minutes, okay?
What I was going to say is that Aaron probably has quite a few stories that Moshe told him, knowing how long they've been together. So I wouldn't be surprised.
And they say the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So I know you carry a lot of your father's quality from what I know from you directly. But again, we're very sorry for your loss.
Amen.
I'll just follow up on my father quickly, which is,
yes, Aaron.
Which is just that, when you said before, like, your children really knew him. I have to tell you, I'm a pretty good witness to that because I think I only met him about 2 or 3 times at Simchas, but
Where'd it go? Where'd the bug go?
Moshe and from other people, I have a very good sense of him. And it was very much true that Moshe would talk about him all the time. So it was very true,
Listen, as I said, to me, my kids, thank God, had a great relationship, and they were able to do that. And so I always say is that thank God they had that ability. And listen, my kids had a great listen. I think if you ask me who my father's favorite Dulitz was, who do you think, Aaron?
I don't want to say, but you can say.
It wasn't Moshe. It was Vicky. By far, if you asked anybody who my father's favorite Dulitz was by far my daughter-in-law, because she's a doctor, and every time there was a fall, they called her up. She'd come over, she'd cook for them, she'd do stuff for them. And listen, by far, my father would. When I went down on Thanksgiving that week, I was down here. I was here with my father for 5 days talking. I may have gotten maybe 15 minutes of a conversation from, maybe 20. My daughter-in-law was there for 1 day. She got a 45 minutes schmooze and a hug. That's more than anyone else got that week. And so I tell you, there's no question in my mind, my father's favorite Dulitz was Tiki Dulitz, by far. Not even a question. So. Amen. Dr. Harris. Amen. Thank you. Dr. Harris.
Elchanan, I just
yeah.
want to express gratitude to your father. This is, I had you as a student and I had him as a teacher. And at a time where I was thinking of going to law school, I remember he asked me to substitute for him for 2 weeks. He had to be away for something, I don't remember what. And I taught Kol Kisvei, 1980. 1980.
1980. I'm trying to think what happened in 1980 in my life.
I substituted for him for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I said, this is fun. I can do this. And he took me under his wings. He taught me what to do, where to go. And it's it worked. Baruch Hashem.
So Rabbi Schwartz,
and then,
he was a big fan of yours. I used to take Tanakh with you, and my father asked me, so what are you taking? Blah 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 blah. And he didn't care who I took history with, or chemistry, or anything else. He asked me who's my Rebbe, and who taught me Tanakh. So I told him, I said, it's Rabbi Alan Schwartz. He goes, he had a good teacher. Referring to me. So I remember my father would say that all the time. So yes.
Baruch Hashem, yes, we have all fun, especially from the Bronx. We have great memories. He knew my grandfather. He knew my uncles. And, the whole Schneiders out there in the Bronx and the Dulitzes. They were close for a long time.
Thank you so much.
You should cherish these incredible memories and have them for Admei Esrim.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Goldstein, I've seen you. I've known you probably the longest on this here, because you and Danny Metzger probably known me since my bris. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, our fathers were so close.
The best, again, my father that was one of the top 5. Rabbi Dr. Goldstein.
And of course, my mother was involved in a lot of raising that occurred during your youth.
Oh boy, I remember your mother vividly. Listen, as I said, to me, growing up, my father, there was two people in 320 Wandsworth Avenue that my father spoke to all the time. Your father and the Metzgers.
Mm-hmm.
Go down, and I remember vividly, we'd go there and he would talk. And again, he was one of those guys that my father would tower over, and they would scream and learning. I couldn't understand the concept at the time. I thought it was a little bizarre. But then again, it's not the first thing that was bizarre about my father. So I wasn't going to ask. But again, inevitably, those were my father's closest friends. Like again, I remember when your father died. My father, it took him 6 months to recover. He was shattered.
Mm-hmm.
I remember vividly, and he was like, he was his guy.
What's very touching is that my mother's yard site was this past Friday, and my father's yard site is this coming Friday. So for your father and my parents' yard sites to be so close together is just incredible to me.
So your father's yard site was
this coming Friday.
Last Friday.
No, last Friday was my mother's. My parents' yard sites are a week apart.
Right, but that's my father's yard site. It's Friday.
Right.
And by the way, they share that yard site with somebody very special. The 20th day of Tevis is the Rambam's yard site. So as I said, Mimoshe ad Moshe to Aryeh ben Moshe lo kambi sol k'Moshe od. So it's a very special day.
Well, my father's is Chavav. My father's Hay. My mother's Shva. My mother's Chavav. So I'm saying within 2 week period, they're all.
I'm saying, listen, it's
yeah. But I still remember
together
every day. My father and your father would be talking and learning, because they would always be discussing what were they going to say in Shir next day. And your father was like Lyndon Johnson. He towered over my father, and he'd get him into a corner, and he'd start like with his finger, like what is this? 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 Until they finally together, came to a conclusion about what the show was going to be about. And then, as you know, I was in your father's English class. I was one of the only people from MTA that ever switched out of Mr. Bernstein, into your father's English class as a senior, and it was a phenomenal experience.
Why would you do that?
Because that's what a lot of people ask.
Why would anybody do that?
Yeah, why would you do that? You don't want to get into college?
I wanted to learn Shakespeare.
Listen, Harris, I just want you to know, when people say to me, I didn't have him share, I had him for English. I said, why would you go through 45 minutes of hell to learn 10,000 English words? If you want to tell me you sit and shear and you sit and learn, so he told you a derech of limud. I get that. That's something you can use, 50 years from now. But to tell me that you're going to go there for 45 minutes, and listen, Avishai David, who wrote a Hesped, who's sick, says to me, I had to learn 10,000 words for your father. I said, that is insane. I would have said, I'd kind of cover Zion. I would have been out the next day.
But your father treated Shakespeare like it was Gemara, and Kittredge was his
Manta Hall. Manta Hall.
I understand that, but still, to me, I just can't wrap my head around the concept that a guy like Shakespeare, who was a Sony Yisrael, we don't even know if he spoke. It was him because there's no proof that Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, that we know was actually the author. He's a Sony, so why would I care about this guy? How is that not B'nai Torah? I don't get it.
How did your father answer that question?
So the answer is that my father had a roommate. His roommate's name was, you may have heard of him, his name is Rabbi Lichtenstein. They were roommates. You can understand that they were talking about the Inferno in their conversations. But my father said he held this was Emes Lamita Shel Torah. He really believed that, and I really did not. So he and I, that's one of the many things that we disagreed about.
Some of us were gluttons for punishment and had your father not for 1 year, 2 years, but 3 years. There are a few.
Did you have him for French?
No, because in our sophomore year at MTA, Mr. Bloom, Alav Shalom, got sick. Your father came in the middle of the year, and so we had him for English for sophomore year, then for junior, for shear. And the problem for him was by the last year of the senior year, the shock and awe had abated a little bit. So we were a little difficult to control at times. But it was an experience.
Very few people survived 3 years, but the ones that got him for third year, he was sort of like, you kind of knew his shtick. So you came in that first year and you were terrified. I mean, I had friends of mine saying, I'm surprised you haven't, how did you survive? This guy is crazy. So my response is that he's different as a parent than as a teacher. But the truth is, but listen, as I said, the first year he did it, the second year. But the truth is, most guys that had him for third year had him for French. And anybody taking my father for French is insane as it is. So for following my father, listen, I've had many people, Rabbi, that have had him for 3 years, and to survive him for 3 years, they enjoyed him.
Yes, we did.
Rabbi David said to me, Avishai David said to me, if I could have taken him my first year of college, I would have. I would have stayed with him forever. He was whatever. He was my father was as a teacher. He was a pedagogue par excellence. He had the unbelievable ability to teach. He had the ability to connect as a teacher. He had some great students. But the truth is that as a parent, he was tough. He was just very tough.
In our sophomore year in shear, he yelled at us, almost yelled at us. Why? He says, you don't know anything about the Gospels. How can you not have read the Gospels so you know what they say about us? Can you imagine a Rebbe saying that to boys in their sophomore year? It's incredible.
100%. My father was, you have to understand, my father was bigger than life. He knew everything. And I say everything, I mean everything. It's like when, in my family, my parents' house, they would watch Jeopardy. Now we watch Jeopardy because it's entertaining. My parents did Jeopardy to see who'd get the answer first. You have to understand. And the truth is, my mother, much better than my father. I'm telling you, I can be mad. I mean, for years, my mother, like that, boom, 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 everything on any topic. My father was on his topics was faster, but he didn't have the breath that my mother did. But the point is, I said, this is all Narishkeit. Let's go watch a ball game. Come on. And that's why I just couldn't comprehend. I just couldn't. My parents just had this thirst for knowledge, which it just didn't get past to me. Maybe it skips a generation or two. I don't know. Maybe 4. My kids don't.
You're not bad. Elchanan, you're not bad.
I didn't say it was bad or good. I'm not comparing myself to that, Eddie. I'm just saying that my parents had this, they knew it all. Listen, my parents knew it. My father was one of those guys that just knew everything. He said.
Elchanan, did you get your basketball skills from him?
Actually, my father didn't know how to ride a bike till he was 37 years old.
He learned at 37?
He learned at 37, 38, yeah. What happened was in 1973, my parents rented a house in Far Rockaway. And so I had nothing to do except for riding my bike.
I remember him from Far Rockaway. I saw him in Far Rockaway.
My father said he wasn't going to walk with me. It was easier for him to learn how to ride a bike than it was for him to walk with me up and down the boardwalk. So everyone says, oh, he was never in a gang. He learned how. So it was 73. He was born in 33. I take it back. He was 40 years old. It was 1973. He learned how to ride a bike.
Wow.
Again, he had those sexy shorts that are back in style, that were out of style for 20 years. You probably have seen him. I mean, he had black shoes. He didn't wear sneakers at the time. Black shoes, black socks, shorts, and a button down.
The Raleigh comic song was White Socks and Sandals, Sandals, White Socks and Sandals. You never heard that?
Right. So you wore in camp, you wore sandals.
White Socks and Sandals. That was the song.
And then as he got older, he got those half and halves, where the top was black, the bottom was white, and he wear shoes with him. So it looked like he's wearing black socks with black shoes. My father, he understood. He understood. So Danny, so I will tell you, Danny, I see Danny and Joey, I tell you, so the one thing I will remember from your father's Fadim, Superman. I just wonder. So my father, we talk about your father many times. And, again, they were in the Rav Shir together. They used to schmooze in the older days, So I asked my father, who are the guys that you remember from the Rav Shir from your, again, first one was Reb Zachariah. On top of the list all the time. And again, maybe they're both 6'2", both brilliant. I don't know. But I will say Superman. I will forever remember.
So the truth is that I was always scared of your father because my brother, Ari, told me he once bumped into your father and your father said, you're my Rebbe's Nicole. I'm going to give you a faher.
Oh, my God.
And they told me, he knows Shas Malpeh.
He does.
I would never tell him who I was. I was always scared of him. I ran from him. My brother told me, oh my gosh, Rabbi Dulitz, he got me and he fahered me. You would not believe how difficult it was. So I made it a point of avoiding him. I was scared of your father. I don't think...
Ari would see him and he'd come back to Teaneck. He says, oh my God, I saw your father. I said, how was it? He says, it was terrifying. And my father, he said, what are you learning? He didn't say, hey, here's a Gemara in Zvachim, tell me. No, what are you learning? Oh, that's what you're learning? Let's talk about it. You don't know the Rashi, Machlokes, Rashi, and Rambam with that? Who's teaching you? And he'd go on a tirade for 5 minutes. I grew up with that. So been there, seen it, done it many times over. But you should know your father had a sweet place in my father's memory about being in the Rav Shir together. So you should know. He was one of those guys, always at the Rav Shir, every Tuesday night, guy in the front, always there. Always there. So you should know. He had a sweet spot in my father's heart, so just
And you did in my dad's heart as well.
Listen, I love your father. He was awesome.
And by the way, we are in Mitzvah Shem going to go back to a minyan and learning. But those many, many years that you spent with my dad, whether it was when my brother wouldn't show up and either you would take the front chair or my father unprepared, those were very, very special times. And my father appreciated your company very much.
Listen, I used to shoes with him all the time. He was a great man, and he'll be sorely missed.
Yeah.
No, I listen. Ima Anochi Batzara these days. I'm
Yeah.
there. I'm there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your father, of course, was a very, very special. I was one of those people who was born between December 31 and January 1, who never had him for Shir or for English. Excuse me?
You escaped?
And I learned an awful lot from him. I learned, besides Guach Hazat and Nat Bashkat, the whole 9 yards. But
so what's God's phone number?
I was just telling my kids that 544-353.
There we go. Now there's the Talmud. There we go.
Yeah.
But listen, I tell you, when people say that to me, they say, "How many books of the Tanakh?" I said, "If you don't know God's phone number, hang up." They look at me like I'm from Mars. I said, "What are you doing? I grew up as a kid."
Well, also because nowadays there's 7 digits on Israeli phone numbers. The whole chapter.
And the answer is God wrote the Torah before they had 7 digits. That's where there's only 6. My father says it all the time. Whatever. Listen. My father. These things. I'm sorry. They ring in my mind. I all the time. Every single time I hear my father, he's in the back of my head. All the time. I say something, he's fighting with me. No, I don't think so.
Should have no more tsar.
Oh man, thank you, Manny. Thank you so much.
I was just talking about 544-353 over Shabbos, and I was talking about we're coming up on the Arba Parashiyot. So I was just telling someone about
Zatu Bodalubiu.
I was just
there we go. For those people, Zatu Bodalubiu is that when you have the Arba Parashiyot, the one that's missing. So Zatu is that if Rosh Chodesh comes out on Zion, then 2 Tesvav, the 15th of the month, doesn't have one of the 4 parashiyos. So my father told me this stuff like it reverberates. I hear it, and it's my father talking in my ear all the time. Yeah.
You were the child of 3 he was referring to.
By the way, many a time, Adam, many a time. I was the guy he was talking about. And so you should know. So one of my charusas is over here. So Rabbi Blau Shlita, it was my charusa for many years in YU. And he could tell you the stories of my father. And listen, we sat down many years together. He elevated my learning. He was a very special person in my life. Usher at my wedding, of course. But you should know, he was one of the guys that kind of like, something's happened in YU. Rabbi Blau would come over. We'd have a schmooze. We'd discuss. So I know you don't say anything. I got you.
He was the best. He was really the best. I was so excited. I used to see him in Florida all the time because I used to go down to visit my sister. And I used to love seeing him. I would see him on the street, then I would see him in Tower 41. So very recently we were there. We davened in Tower 41 Friday night. I normally wasn't there for davening. So I was so excited because Avi was with me. So I wanted to introduce him to Avi. I said, Rebbe, this is my son. I'm so excited to introduce him to you. It's such a zchus. And he just looks at him, looks at me, and he says, "Where's his tie? It's Friday night. Where's his tie?" That was all he wanted to say.
Adam, come on. My father's, but you should know, Adam, you know how crazy that is? I'm on the plane going to Israel with the body, and I take my tie off and I put it on top, and we're getting off the plane, and I say to my sister, I can't find my tie. Oh, could you imagine if I give a hesped for my father and don't have, he's going to haunt me for my life. He's going to haunt me for life. No tie at a funeral? Are you kidding me?
I had a friend, I don't even remember what he did, but his punishment in Shir, I don't remember what he did. He had to wear a tie every day from Thanksgiving till June. He made him wear a tie every day in Shir the whole year.
And if you didn't, he'd kick you out if you didn't wear a tie.
Oh yeah, no, that was exactly.
He was ferocious. Some of the things, and the truth is, I never understood it. I never really understood his fanaticism about ties. But I think it goes back to that covenant Torah. He said, "Listen, you come in." When he was in the Rav Shir, they all walked in with jackets and ties. That was the standard. That was the dress in those days.
Dress code.
That was the dress code. But today, he tried to instill what was gone from yesteryear. And whatever, I tell you, it's watching the students that came back and with helmet. Listen, I have a friend of mine that he says he always wears a blue shirt b'shita but on Shabbos, he always wears a tie. And he says, I was in your father's shir, I always wear a tie on Shabbos. I may not wear the white shirt, but always wear a tie.
Elchanan, did you find your tie before the funeral?
I did find my tie, thank God.
He did.
Found it. And I'm telling you, you just asked him, I was really scared. I was shaking. I said, oh my God, if I didn't have, he'd come back. My father would haunt me if I didn't have a tie. No, not even like in my mind.
He already delayed your flight. He already delayed the flight to Israel. He could have done that too. Who knows what he could have done to you?
Listen, my father's haunting me from the grave since day one. He thinks you're gonna get through it easy. I don't think so. He's sitting there saying, okay, who's gonna have the last laugh?
It's over there.
Whatever. Baruch Hashem.
I just want to tell you, Machim Menachem Eskom Tov Shveitim Yishalayim.
Amen.
You know, I will. We will all try to find time. There's so many people who want to talk to you on this. I don't want to monopolize time. I will call you later.
I told you 3 times to speak later, but I'll see you later, Benny. Bye.
Talk to you later.
We wanted to say should only have sleepless.
Amen.
And
Amen. Thank you.
enjoy all the positive memories. Just think about all the good times.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you so much.
Even and I wanted to say, Hamachim Menachem Eschem B'Toch Sharei Avdei Yisrael B'Yerushalayim. And I have to tell you, even though we didn't know him so well personally, when we got off from the funeral, I immediately told all the girls so many pieces of information that were so inspiring. And one thing was, like we said to them, this is someone who went to like a Talmud Torah and became a big Talmud Chacham. So, you know, think of how your learning can pay off for later. And if you work hard at something, you know, in Torah, you really could really make a big influence on Klal Yisrael. So it was a very good inspiration for the girls.
So I will tell you, Susan, when I on Thursday, I got a call from Chaim Ilson. Chaim Ilson, I said this story before about an hour ago, but Chaim Ilson runs this kollel in Eretz Yisrael. He's like the top guy, brilliant. This guy went to Bronx Science in 9th grade. I mean, never learned a word in his life. Goes to MTA in 10th grade, and he's goes to Rabbi Rakefet's class in 1960. He gets kicked out, or maybe earlier, maybe 1958 or 59. He gets kicked out, goes to Rabbi Dulitz's class. He's there the first day. The guy reads the Gemara, and Chaim Ilson says, maybe one day my kids will be able to read a Gemara like that. My father said, and he and Rabbi Ilson were cut from the same cloth. My father sat there, worked with him for the whole year. By the end of the year, he was able to read, we've shown him, able to read Gemaras. He went to the top share and he said, everything I am today, quote, and every one of my students is because of your father. I will forever be grateful to him. So I tell you, it's not just my father. There are many people that don't have that education, but you know something? It's about wanting, it's about the desire. It's all about what you want to do. And if you're willing to do it, the world is your oyster. So Chaim Ilson said this to me. I just want you to know, he blew me away. He says, every single one of my students is your father's student. So my father taught thousands, but he inspired tens of thousands.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I just remember, Elchanan, how much you would look forward to having your father for this year between Mincha and Mariv on Shabbos.
David,
you always look forward to that.
I dreaded those moments. Dreaded them. I dreaded moments where my father would be there at a share I gave, because inevitably somebody would be crying. It was usually me.
Those would always be a spicy shear.
Oh, people would come just for the fun and entertainment, bring popcorn, whatever. My father was.
David always told me that.
He was. He came by. He enjoyed testing me. That was that was one of his thrills. He didn't have enough. He didn't watch a Yankee game. He came by to watch me sweat. That was his fun.
You obliged him like a good son. You obliged him.
Listen, I wasn't gonna listen. I never stepped down from a challenge. That's not me. So that's kind of what happened. So he is a very, very unique person, and very, he made me who I am today.
No question.
So, Elchanan, I'm glad I didn't know your father, but I'm hearing all these wonderful things.
and I'm getting his Torah through your lips, and I'm happy for that. And I wrote a little blurb about that I heard about your father through a non-MTA connection. You'll read it later from a guy named Sammy Weiss at Brooklyn. So his reputation really exceeded even, as you just made the point with Rav Ilson, just unimaginable. So you should have memories, and it should last multiple generations.
Thank you, everyone. But I just want you to know, he wasn't the only one. Jeremy Weeder said it. Ephraim Canafogel said it. Michael Talbot said it. I can't tell you. Shimon Kerner said it. Arnie Kinerick said it. All these guys, ask them. Said, who's the guy that inspired you? He inspired the uninspired. He took bright guys that just didn't really care and changed their lives. So listen, it should be a mail Yosha for all of us. And thank God. Hi, Miss Lua. How are you? Aviva, you look very Haredi there, by the way. I'm not gonna lie.
Sorry, it kind of blurred out. Blurred out for a second.
I spoke to your father right before the thing. They're doing well.
I know, I heard. We were there last Shabbos and the week before that, and I had actually on Thursday night when we got the news that he was nifter, I said to my father at the table, I was like, how is he doing? And it was constantly on my mind. And that whole Shabbos, as soon as we found out, like we could not stop talking about stories. My dad was telling all the stories about Shakespeare and how your father used to be able to quote Shakespeare like that, and just such a Talmud Chacham he really was.
He knew the gospel also.
And we were joking.
He sang Amazing Grace pretty well, not gonna lie.
Impressive.
He knew the words. It was off tune, but he knew the words. But listen, as I said, he knew it all. He just knew everything.
Such a special person.
That's true.
Connor, you're not having gone to MTA or gone to YU. I probably absorbed 30 years of Rabbi Dulitz stories from friends, each one more incredulous than the next. When I finally met him, probably, 10 years ago at a Beth Abraham dinner, I was very disappointed. He didn't abuse me. He didn't make fun of me. I was like, what, I'm not good enough? But what I learned from everyone was that's what inspired people. I wish someone had said, like he said to them, you'll never amount to anything. Because you look at so many people that amount, as you've said, to so much because your dad challenged him. I just think it's such an incredible legacy. And I think about this is an old book, one of my favorites, Tuesday with Maury. I'm going to read you one quick sentence that reminds me of your dad. He said, quote, have you ever really had a teacher, one who saw you as a raw but precious thing, a jewel that with wisdom could be polished to a proud shine? If you are lucky enough to find your way to such teachers, you will always find your way back. And it sounds like all his students did. We want to wish you together. Hamacham Yenachem Estem B'Sel Shar Ve'Letzion Yerushalayim. Have only good memories of your father.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Welcome Menachem Estem B'Sel Shar Ve'Letzion Yerushalayim.
Thank you so much. Amen. Thank you.
Elchanan, I never went to MTA, so I didn't have his father, but Richie had him as a substitute for I'm not sure how long.
There was one of his teachers, unfortunately, was undergoing cancer treatments, and he didn't, so your father stepped in. I think it might have been a history class for a couple of months, but he combined so many different things, and he was known in Richie's times of having the air Gemara and the air Shakespeare.
So you and your sister may play down his memory and make fun of that and everything, but we heard it from Richie. We didn't hear it from
they were amazed.
Somebody down the block or reading it in a book somewhere.
I see it in my mind's eye. Every time my parents, I quote a Gemara from somewhere or a halacha, and it's something that related to my father. I see him I see him turning pages.
Yeah.
He was able to do that, and he knew it was on them. He had the ability to, he really had an amazing memory. It wasn't photographic. You asked him to read something, he couldn't memorize it, but he sat down and learned it. He learned everything, and he just knew everything. My father knew everything. And whatever, he's a very special guy, very blessed.
Very unique person, very unique.
Very unique. Amen. Amen. Thank you, David.
What I remember about your father is that unless he understood something like really clear, he kept at it, persistence until he understood it clearly. And I think that contributed to his ability to really know things, was that until he clearly understood it, he wouldn't stop. But that also enabled him to be such a good teacher, because he knew how to then transfer it over to somebody else in a manner that they were able to understand it. And again, such an impactful person. And he did live up to his hype. I mean, he really did. People heard about him and they didn't believe it. And then they had the experience, and he was one of a kind. And again, he should be a Me'alas Yashar for all of us. And I know if I would want to have a Me'alas Yashar and Shemayim, it would definitely be your father, because he wouldn't stop.
He's already negotiating with God.
Exactly. He wouldn't stop until he convinced him that what he wanted to do was the right thing to
Fighting
do.
with him, not even a question. Not even a question. My father is sitting there and having conversations.
And
Thank you, Harry.
The end of that is Veloso Sifu Udaba Ode and Hamedi Nyavid.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm not going to come so Charlotte Mishalaya.
Amen. Send my regards to Washburn, Boraski people.
We'll do. See you soon.
God willing. So Pesci, nothing. I'm waiting. The rabbi has spoken to 20,000 times already.
I know. I have many things I want to say. I'm not so good in front of people, but I'll tell you two things. First of all, in the Neuberger home, the big Rabbi Dulitz memory is when Mutzi had him for Navi. And it took a while till Mutzi loved him. It did happen, but it took a while. And we remember that, I remember when Yaakov came home and told me this story. He said he met Rabbi Dulitz in the hallway, and Rabbi Dulitz said, "Rabbi Neuberger, your son, he has potential, but there's a long way to go. And I'm going to whip him into shape. Because I care about him. I'm going to whip him into shape. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to do it because he has potential," over and over again. And, Yaakov, in his very soft way, "Thank you, Rabbi Dulitz. I really appreciate your taking an interest." And he starts to walk away, and Rabbi Dulitz and your father says, "Wait, Rabbi Neuberger, tell me, does he like me too?" And, my husband, so he didn't say anything. "Rabbi Neuberger, answer me, does he like me too?" And Yaakov said to him, "Rabbi Dulitz, you are definitely an acquired taste." And but it was acquired. Mutzi very much did acquire it. And the other thing I have to say, Elchanan, with and people have skirted around this, but I know firsthand from my own children, and the tough love you give my own children with extreme love is so appreciated, and so much, with all the differences between you and your father, something that you very much have the same is the ability to care for other people's children as if they're your own. And to me, that's his legacy that impresses us.
Thank you so much. So Dr. Darren Blackson, you didn't have my father? Kenny did though, no?
He knew my brother because of clerical stuff at YU, but my brother didn't go to MTA. He became frum by college. I had your father for 11th grade English.
You didn't have him for Gemara?
No, I didn't. I wasn't on that level.
That's a waste.
But because of his connection with my brother, it kind of because that was more social, so that kind of leaked over to me. And he kidded around. I'm sorry.
He didn't come after you? He's nice to you?
Not really. He kidded around with us, but for another time, other parts of the story of my winding up in that time zone. But they say timing is everything, and
That would be regrettable.
I'm sorry?
That would be regrettable.
Yes.
Regrettably, they would not be able to do that, yes.
Yeah, it's regrettable,
I
and
can
you
barely
know,
speak English, so.
but to be blessed with so many decades of, you know, of students that crossed your father's paths, and that during that tkufa, everyone was definitely shaykh to be able to absorb his, you know, what he offered, even well above and beyond the knowledge, the drive, the passion, the motivation, the seeking of MS. And that's what drove him to, you know, to be able to be someone that is, like you say, larger than life, because his life was dedicated to something larger than life, HaKadosh Baruch Hu and MS. And everybody, whether they knew it or not, they somehow felt that essence. They keyed in on that, and he was so beloved by thousands. And I felt it very, very deeply. I pulled an all-nighter to study. I think it was 1,000 words in word wealth, and for my final,
sounds like my father.
For my, and I got a 99 on the. To one point, I didn't care. I think I got a 99 on that test. I don't know if I've ever been as proud of something in my life, because he wanted it, he demanded it, and I stayed up all night with a bunch of guys, and we were testing each other all night, and we did it. And it was just it was a bracha.
Listen, he certain people, listen, as I said, to me, he was bigger than life. He was. Thank you. So Mr. Hanauer.
I'm sorry?
Oh, go down. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. We should share smachot.
Thank you, Brandy and Darren. So Gabriel.
President Dulai.
How are you doing?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mazel bracha, please send regards.
Yes, same here.
Mr. Seabrow. So here.
How you doing?
Listen, I've had better days. I'm not gonna lie.
I never had your father at MTA, and we knew him growing up in the Bronx. My parents and your parents from way back when.
From way back when.
But, way back when. But I do remember he gave a shiur once in the, I think it was the Browns Hotel or one of the Catskill hotels, about the importance of using the hand with your shel yad on to take the shel rosh off.
Correct.
And I must have been maybe 2 or 3 years into putting on tefillin, teenager, and no one had taught me that. But your father, to his credit, taught me that, and to this day I'm doing it correctly.
Gotta take
So
your tefillin off with the weaker hand, because you want to take it off slower, because you don't really want to take it off. Listen,
correct.
as I said, these are things awesome.
Yeah. So he, even not being a teacher to me personally and not seeing him around Teaneck too often, I still have learned a lot from him. I remember him well. So Amakim Menachem Etzem B'toch Shar V'Yisraelim, showing no symptoms from this point forward. May mother be well, and
Thank you so much, Sue.
Bye.
Amen. Mendel, you here? You there?
I'm back home.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't know where you are anymore.
I caught you for a few minutes before you had to go down to Florida.
Right.
Your house.
Yeah.
Right. And we had the wedding, and we had shara brachas, and we had the ofruf, and I picked up COVID on the way home, and now I'm sick. But I've been watching. I was on a live stream for the funeral, and so awed and so moved. I didn't. It's a good thing I didn't go to MTA. I wouldn't have survived it.
By the way, neither would I have.
Yeah, but I did meet him over the years in school, and he was an impressive man. I'm trying to remember the line that my father-in-law says over about your father, and I know when he told it to your father was very, very impressed and about him, and I can't think of what it was, about the converse I'm gonna ask you, but my father-in-law also shared a love for Nechama, and I'm sure they talked about it all.
Listen, he loved Nechama. He was only there one summer, and he just fell in love with her. He said everything she
Right. I'm sure they were on the same program.
They probably were. I'm not saying no. That one summer, he was talking about it for
My father-in-law also had a second love. He talks about it with reverence and love and just unbelievable love.
So thank you.
I'm going to go back to bed. I love you. And I miss you.
Feel better.
You should have a lot of good memories and
thank you so much.
Carry them onto your kids.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Barbara, how are you?
Joey. So Joey and I have a different, lots of stories, but what I'm going to say is two thoughts. I remember when we first came to the family, you guys got married first, and how welcoming. I remember going to the house in Pelham Parkway. I remember it so well. Your parents welcomed us in the family because we were getting married second. And I remember so well all the simchas that your father and mother, they were so loving of family and extending their family and including us in their family to the point where I went with your aunts. I don't know if you knew this. I enjoyed listening to all your father's speeches and how brilliant he was, and he can just shoot off Tanakh and Gemara and everything and all the simchas. But I remember how special it was. I went with your Aunt Leah and your Aunt Bessie shopping on Friday, and they would speak about your father in such a loving way, their little brother. They would speak about him, and you could see the love that was in the family, and and your parents' love of yourself and Hannah and the children and the grandchildren. You could see how much they loved everybody and they cared for everybody, and such a legacy for the family that it even extended to us when our children were born, and your parents knew we didn't have children for 10 years. Your parents ordered us a dollhouse. I don't know if you knew this. Sheena got a dollhouse, but we also got a dollhouse. And such care and time and effort. Your mother called so many times discussing with your father about the dollhouse. And the other memory I have is when we went to New Orleans. What?
Obsessive compulsive with the dollhouse. Yes.
And the other memory we have is that we went to New Orleans. Joey and I went. And the people in New Orleans wouldn't stop talking about your father, about your grandparents. We spent Shabbos there, me and Joey. So I'm going to let Joey speak, but it was such beautiful memories.
In New Orleans.
Yeah, they wouldn't. We went to Metairie because the shul burnt down. The shul had that terrible flood, if you remember. And the Rav who was in Metairie, the Rav that was in New Orleans, was very apologetic because he was about to have a baby, and he said, we really feel very special relationship with Elchanan. And I guess you had been there with Hannah.
We had a family reunion. We had a family reunion down there. And what happened is that we went down there for, my father hadn't been at his parents' cemetery in about 20 years. So my parents, we went down as a family reunion in 2012 to see all the graves, see my parents, my grandparents' graves, and my great-grandparents' graves. So, my family's been in New Orleans since 1880. So I'll say that my parents are very enriched in that community. So thank God. So whatever. So I would say is that so we went down there. So my father, it was open, actually open in one when you walk into the Anshe Sfard Shul, one of the things are open is one of the Dulitzes are mentioned there. I think it was my grandmother's birthday, whatever, I don't know. But yeah, so my father, that's the Al-Tahim. That is the Al-Tahim for us.
Even in Metairie, where we were for Shabbos, there was Siddurim with the Dulitz's name. We opened Where's Joey? We opened one of the Sidurim and there was the name engraved in the Dulitz in the name. And then a family member came over to us while we were in shul and said that there's still Dulitzes who live in New Orleans, and they were talking about your parents and your grandparents. They were talking to us about it.
There are Dulitzes that live in New Orleans today. None of them are from my grandfather, my father's father, Morris Dulitz, had 10 siblings. I think it's 5 brothers and 4 sisters. So there are a lot of Dulitzes that are still there. And he had first cousins that were Dulitzes. So my great-great-grandparents came. It's my whole family's there. So there are a lot of comes. And a lot of them are not Dulitzes that have Wachowski, Palet, all these other names that are part of our family. So there's an extended family in New Orleans today. So just because his name is Dulitz, it could be a 14th cousin 3 times removed. Now, it's not necessarily my parents, but, my father's down the road. So, but yeah, so my father, listen, we've been there since, as I said at the funeral, my father's namesake, Label Gordon, was a Melamed in the 1870s, 1880s. He taught Torah. He was my father's namesake, and he taught like my father did, and he raised 5 from girls, and he was very unique. My grandmother was very from. My grandmother was a mikveh lady. My grandfather was not from. My grandmother would march the kids through the store on Shabbos to shul, bedavka, to do that, saying this is what we do. My father had a great, backbone of Judaism in his family. The reason he got smicha is because my grandmother told him, "You're going to YU, you get smicha." She knew he was going to be a Rebbe, but she didn't know what he was going to do. But my grandmother was very from. Her sisters were all from. Listen, this is 1880s in New Orleans, 1890s in New Orleans.
Wow. So impressive, Elchanan. Joey and I were so impressed with the community.
Nothing to do with me.
So impressed. And they all loved your family and your parents. They were talking to us about it. The whole Shabbos, we still talk about being a Metairie that Shabbos. That was so memorable.
There also. It's like when you're Lahavdil, where Michael Jordan was born. I'm assuming that wherever in Ohio he was born, guys still talk about it. I remember Michael Jordan when he was 4 years old. He's slamming. You know what I'm saying? So my father was the same way. He was a Doogie Howser. He was brilliant. They all knew him. There was a small Jewish community. Everybody knew who my father was. And they and then he went to YU and became a big rabbi. And hey, he was one of the legends in New Orleans.
Such nachas that he had from you and Hannah and everybody. Such nachas.
Amazing.
Whenever I would see him in Simcha, that's all he would talk about, is you and Hannah and the children and the grandchildren. That's all he would talk. It was remarkable. You should know that. You should know that he brought you so much nachas.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
From all of us in Joey's line.
Yes, sir. Stephanie, you got to unmute yourself. I can't hear you. Stephanie, you're on mute. Hold a second.
Okay. Now
Amen. Thank you. Yes, Stephanie.
Let the lawyer speak.
Just wanted to say but I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, I Mitchell had told me wonderful stories. I just never, when I met you with Saul, I never understood, why didn't you go to MTA? I never asked you, but now I could ask you.
I'll answer the answer very simply. And I gone to MTA, one of us went to survive.
Oh, okay.
It's very simple. No.
I was wondering.
One of us went to survive.
So you went to Scranton?
I did.
So why did you choose Scranton? Did your father choose that?
My best friend growing up, his name was Yankee Bilas. He went to Scranton. So I said, I need to get out. So I'll go to Scranton.
Oh, okay. I was always wondering, that's how
it was chosen. My best friend went there.
It wasn't that your father said you can't go to MTA, you have to go, he didn't want you to go to the same school.
There's an unwritten rule in my family.
Yeah.
Too much family is painful.
Okay.
Going to MTA was just never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
It wasn't going to happen. Okay. I was always curious why you didn't go. What, some people, he would have
To
gotten
me-
a tuition
To
break.
me, it's a no-brainer kind of thing. Just wasn't going to happen.
No, yeah, he would have gotten a big tuition break, kind of thing, I guess. Not in those years.
Yeah,
maybe.
listen, you're a Rebbe, they're going to give you a tuition break wherever you go.
Yeah. Okay.
My father and I just weren't gonna survive together.
I know. I was just wondering why. Was it him or you who wanted not to go to? I was always curious. Was it you or him?
More me than him.
More you than him. Got it. Okay. Well, I've heard nice stories about Scranton, so from a rummy. So I guess
You were
it was okay. I know.
Well.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry for your loss, and
Thank
he
you so
was
much.
very nice, and I hope you have a rest of the time there and easy trip back.
Oh man, so Rabbi, Dr. Paul Fight, am I going to see your face or just I'm going to see your iPad? My next door neighbor's there. I just want to see if is Carl. All right, so whatever. So Rabbi Kamenetsky, Shlita Kodesh V'Nerishmo.
I want to tell you one very quick story about your father. Just one very quick story, which I don't think anybody else will be able to tell you the story. As you know, Elchanan, I was a Rebbe in MTA at the same time that your father was a Rebbe. I remember one time they brought in, I don't think they ever did it before that or since, but they brought in somebody to teach the Rebbes how to teach Chumash. Somebody like an expert who was probably 30 years younger than your father at the time. They brought a guy in. So all the Rebbes get into this room, and this guy is going to teach us how to teach Chumash. So he starts off and he says, "Okay, what's the first karbanos discussed in Vayikra?" Your father's going to say, "Eilas Alef." Then the next one, "Eilas Bakar, Tzoin, Shlomim." And the guy was he didn't know what to do. Your father knew he knew now.
He read the whole Chumash for him.
He says, "What do you mean?" This guy's used to teaching kids, he was trying to do something interactive. And your father, meanwhile, none of the other Rebbes had any idea what the first parasha in Vayikra was, Aleph, Beis. No, none of the other Rebbes knew anything. He thought, oh my gosh, there's staff here. Everybody, I don't have anything to teach these guys anymore. Your father, he rattled off. We were dying. Anyway, your father had the whole Chumash in front of his face all the time. I mean, he was he had it all there.
Yes, so you should know. He did, and I just got to put my plug in because my fuse dying. My father had the uncanny ability to know everything about everything. Seriously, in a good way. He was really he's really a very special guy. He really was.
He loved to quote chapter and verse. He would quote chapter and verse of Shakespeare, chapter and verse of chapter and verse. Like when you would quote something, you'd say to you got to give chapter and verse. Give me chapter and verse.
By the way,
anyway, I know it's he's when they said at the Levaya larger than life, that was the key. And hopefully, I know you have a lot of an amazing legacy, amazing memories, very, very special, very unique life. You have a unique legacy like nobody else has. I want to wish you a nechama. Hopefully, you should have all those good memories should be with you all the time.
Amen. I gotta find a plug here for my computer. It has a film. Give me 1 second. Only my parents have. I'm actually my parents' phone right now. I came here. Here we go. Here's the fuse plugger. Yes, here we go. 3 plugs. My parents have so much stuff here. There we go. Did it plug in? Thank God. I tell you, this is the first time I've been in my parents' apartment without anybody here. It's weird. It's really weird. I don't think I've been in my parents' apartment the past 20 years, and one of them was not in the house. So I'm here. What can I tell you? Mother's in the hospital. Father's unfortunately not here. It's the Stams. How are we, Stams? How are you doing? Oh, man. Thank you so much. Your parents came to visit us. We saw them on Thursday. They're doing great. They love it.
I will say when I watched the Levaya, I don't remember who was speaking, but they said when we came into 320 Wadsworth and we stopped on floor 1 for some cholents, I knew exactly where they went.
1J, 1K, baby. All the time. There's more 1K than 1J.
I knew exactly the first stop.
They were there. They all the time. All the time.
So I knew your father through stories and stories and stories. I met him a few times. I was a little girl, but definitely the stories from 320 Wadsworth really resonates.
Thank you so much.
Just very quickly, I never met your father, but I am I'm a guest to the Washburn Shear, and I know that your father is very, very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure that he couldn't hear because he was in Florida, but he only knew the Torah.
Don't worry. He definitely made up for it when he came. Trust me. Yes, Michael.
I must have missed
or Carl. You can tell him. They'll tell you. He'd come. It was just fireworks.
You should have a
Just
lot of
fireworks.
and like everyone says, should really take all the memories with you.
Oh, man. Thank you so much.
I believe in Yerushalayim.
How's real?
Rabbi, doing well, Baruch Hashem.
Let me hear. How you doing? All right? You good?
I'm doing well. I don't remember too many stories with your father, besides for the ones that I hear of Zev and Roni in Florida with the learning. But I hear a lot of stories from my dad, which it's very nice to hear.
Your father's quite a few of them. Trust me.
Yeah.
And your grandfather. Ask grandfather about him.
I will.
father had
Make
him
sure
on
that
Shiva.
I will definitely reach out to him. Yeah. I do want to wish Hamakom Menachem Esfem B'Soshar related to Yerushalayim.
Amen.
Neshama should have an Aliyah, and
Amen.
always thankful to the family for everything.
Thank you so much, Azriel. Quote Rav, Rabbi Feinschliter.
Oh, well,
I see Rabbi Feinschliter.
well, Chanan, what can I say, Chanan?
I see Rabbi Fein. This is
the story.
I know something's happening when I see Rabbi Fein in person.
Oh, the stories. But Rabbi, I don't understand your father's famous line with the Rav. But Rabbi, I don't understand, and it didn't matter that Rabbi Soloveitchik would yell at him and I told your father more than once, you know how you were zocher to go ahead and be a Marbitz Torah, that you got the position in YU, and so, probably because of that. You wouldn't let go. You wouldn't let go of the Rav until you understood what was going on. But Rabbi, that New Orleans accent of his, but Rabbi, I don't understand. And he wouldn't let go. And but he was something. His exuberance, we loved it.
What year were you in my father's share?
Okay. I don't think I was ever in a shear of his. He subbed from time to time. And I don't know for whom. I was in YU from the time I was 13, 1957, until I got smicha in 68. I remember him subbing. I don't remember being in a shear of his.
Okay.
But he was a sub. And in important classes, shiurim, I don't know who shiurim, whether it was Rabbi Tendler, junior in high school, Rabbi Yankelevich, sophomore in high school, I don't know. But I remember as a sub. And I don't know if I ever had him for any English subjects. Maybe French 1 year. Is that possible?
Yes, he taught French.
It's possible.
He taught French, Hebrew, English, Spanish. He taught Jewish history and Gemara and Nach.
Okay. Well, I remember him as a sub more than anything, but I remember that famous story about Rabbi Dulitz. But Rebbe, I don't understand. And those are the years that Rabbi Soloveitchik was fired. He practically had no patience. It didn't matter to your father. Your father needed to know and understand what the Rav was saying. He didn't bother him. And that was something that we all admired. And to hear that story, that was classic Rabbi Dulitz. And so, yeah, I know I've heard about him over the years in Florida, because Rabbi Janowski is my mechut.
I did not know that.
Rabbi Janowski's daughter is married to my son, Svi.
Oh, I gotta tell. Oh, wow.
That's
this is-
right.
Wow.
I used to hear stories. I saw him at the weddings. At my own son's wedding. He was there, and he was as loving and as lovable as always. The retired label Dulitz, learning up Daf Yomi and so forth. It was a legend, even his devotion to his learning. As a retiree, but Rabbi Janowski's my machon.
Wow. So Rabbi, my father is very tough on rabbis, very tough, to say the least. And my father, being as brilliant as he was, he was not a easy man to please. And understand his rebellion were the Rav Paleof, Zatzal, and Rabbi Bernstein, Michael Bernstein. So those were his rebellions. So when he came in and he had students, he had guys that were rabbis, he was not a big fan. When he met Rabbi Janowski, you should know, he said, "Here's my new Rebbe." Big fan, big fan. And listen, when my father says big rabbi, that's rare. It's rare that my father, really greeted anybody or had the utmost respect. He was very, very critical of Rabbanim, but he's a big fan. He sat down, learned with him all the time.
Right, I heard.
15 years older than him, but no, that was his Rebbe. He was good.
Yeah, I heard all about it. Meanwhile, I have to run. I wanted to touch base with you. I wanted to see you. I wanted to share my heart with you. We loved him. We loved your father. He was, can I say it? He was adorable. He was adorable.
That's not an adjective I'd use about, or an adjective I use about my father, adorable. But okay, hey, this is an open mic night. You can do whatever you want.
That persona, there was only one label Dulitz. There was no one that even was in that category of his exuberance, his enthusiasm, his youthfulness, and we loved him. We loved him, and he loved us. We felt it. So listen, Elchanan, Simchas and Nachas, I wish you. I'll say to you, Hamakom Yenachem Eschem B'Sol Shor HaVe'etz Yerushalayim. We should get together, good times. You should have Nachas from your family, B'Yez Hashem. Tremendous Nachas, B'Yez Hashem. And we should share good news with God's help. Your father should be a Melech Yosef.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Wish you the best. Wish you the best. Be well. Take care.
So what? Well, I don't have nothing to say. I'm nothing to say, Barbara. I'm not a talker.
You can talk.
What?
Talk, Joe. It's good.
Just express my condolences.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. He was a very special guy. Thank you so much for participating. It's been an awe-inspiring moment for me. And listen, you should be Melech Yosef for all his talmidim, his students, and his friends, and his family. Be a goal. Thank you so much, all.
I'll just tell you one thing, Chana, before you.
Yeah.
I feel like your father also, Label, was like an older brother I never had. I feel like I should be sitting Shiva with you, like I lost a brother, and I feel like you're my nephew.
So I appreciate it. Listen, as I said, he had his chevra of guys from 50, 60, 70 years ago. And there weren't that many. New Orleans didn't have a lot of guys. So listen.
Only two of us left.
What? I was gonna say only two left. Only two of them are left.
I'm the oldest. Older.
Yeah. So Mazel Bracha, maybe Esther many years of Nachas and thing. And so I see Carl coming on, so I'll wait for Carl. So Carl. So my wife said to Michael, you and Carl have to have a drink together. And so Michael says, it's not my thing. I said, Michael, enough. Stop with this formality issue. Go to Carl, have a drink, daven, enjoy.
My Litvisher side, just like your father. The greatest part about your father's Litvisher side was when we went to the Tammet, which was a non-Gebrux hotel. And when they served the soup at the meal right after Achilas matzah, the first thing that he did was take the matzah, crumble it, and throw it into the soup.
He did it all the time. That's listen, my father.
That was
My
great.
father, 100%. My father was a big, he's as misnagdish as they come. Seriously. At the end of the day, he was, he was who he was in very many ways. And listen, he called it the way he saw it.
That's right.
I'm saying he wasn't one of those guys that would sugarcoat anything. And he was just that's who he was. He called it, he did it, he saw it, and done. As I would tell my father, I said, listen, Abba, you don't realize, he wasn't in Teaneck. We were talking about Teaneck, the first rabbi, inauguration. I said, you don't realize what Teaneck's like. I personally happen to be very blessed to have great neighbors, my block, my chevra, it's like, and I told my father, I said, you don't understand what Teaneck is like today. I can't talk about the rest of Teaneck. I can just talk about Washburn, Dearborn, Downing, our 3 blocks. Everything else, it's just about that. So I told my father, so my father would come, and of course, for him, it was all about listen to me give a shiur and have his fun, which was what my father, listen, I think he enjoyed the challenge. He enjoyed the challenge. My father was the only guy that would literally prepare for the shiur so he'd be ready to ask questions. Listen, he did it all the time, and that's okay. That's what made him special.
A lot of things that made your father special. Many things.
So, whatever. Listen, I'm very blessed. Thank God. Listen, as I said, my kids got to meet him, to understand him, to really learn with him, and that's a great thing. It's a great thing to have grandchildren really have that connection with their grandparents. And I feel bad that the great grandparents, he didn't have the relation with the great grandchildren, but the bracha I give you that you should have all your grandchildren, great grandchildren. You should have that experience with them. You should see them. They should have a connection. They should want to be with you. It's a big bracha.
Amen.
So, all right, before I sign off, you want to hamaka me? Take it away.
Oh, we've done, but
Yeah,
we'll do
we
it
did
again.
it. We did it. You
You're
want
welcome
another
back.
one? We'll do another one.
Hamaka
You know,
redux.
Amen. Yes, Lord.
Your father was an incredible guy, Chanan.
He was.
It's a real loss.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Very special to hear all the words of all these, friends and students. And
thank you.
It was very special to get to hear the whole thing. Really enjoyed it.
No, he came back on.
All right. Lila Tovol. I'm going to eat dinner.
See you back home whenever.
See you on the other side, Carl. No
You got
problem.
it.
Bye-bye.
You got it. I'm holding down the fort here. Don't worry.
Awesome. Thank you, sweetie. Bye.